Ba-da-bum-ba. You know what? Something I've always wanted to do with this, and maybe I'll just do it right here. Can I do it? You know what? I'm just not gonna mess with it. I just have always wanted to flip the screen, my webcam screen, because for whatever reason, the way it all works, because technology is as it is, I suppose. When I look at the screen, like the screen that I'm reading from, which is like the thing that you're seeing here, right? It makes me look in the opposite direction of the screen. And so if I flip it, that means that when I look at the screen, I'll be looking at the screen, right? Anyway, you didn't need to know any of that. That was all unimportant. Hello, somebody's there pressing the button. Good to see you guys. Good to see you. I'm glad to be back. I've missed the last two streams because of incredible sickness and capitalism being as it is. I'm just beginning. I'm finished with my vacation period now, and I'm getting back into the stride of the capitalist mode of production. Yay, Kevin. Good to see you. Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to you. Things have been on the news front evolving and changing ever so slightly, but not that seriously, right? It's still the three big stories, right? Ukraine. Ukraine is a disaster. Gaza is a disaster. Climate change is a disaster. Those are the three big stories. DM, good to see you. Yeah. Capitalism still sucks big? Wait a minute. Thank you to whoever's liking the stream. I appreciate that. Vladimir Putin, always a pleasure. Glad to see the president of Russia joins in to the Canadian commie, right? It's amazing, seeing as you're here, Mr. Putin. It is amazing to see how Western media really is attempting to valorize Navalny, right? They're still trying to do it. I've seen reports about how like Navalny's wife. Now they've taken the torch and they've taken it from Navalny, and now it's Navalny's wife. And everything Navalny's wife says, I'm now supposed to put my hand on my heart and be like, from sea to shining sea, about Navalny's wife. It's like, apparently the wife of a Nazi really fucking matters, and we're all supposed to really give a crap about this, like, weird, creepy little Nazi. It's like, do you think maybe this guy ended up in jail not because he was a political opponent to Vladimir Putin, but because he was a weird little Nazi that probably got involved in a lot of weird little Nazi things? And that the whole Vladimir Putin rounding up political opponents thing is a trash talking point. Like, you notice how Vladimir Putin doesn't round up like actual political opposition, right? Like Navalny was not actually serious, credible opponent, right? He never polled higher than 5%, right? He never like won an election. He never actually got a seat anywhere. He didn't do anything, right? Putin's primary opposition in parliament, right, according to parliamentary politics, are the communists. And so this idea that like Putin's arresting opposition because Navalny is a serious threat on a political oppositional level, like what a trash talking point from a trash media system that doesn't actually give a shit to inform its people that, hey, Navalny had ties to like Nazi groups in Russia. Do you think the Russians have something against that? Who's to say? Yeah, Navalny, like and that's the other part. Like, he's not relevant in Russian politics. Like, he's not a big, like, he's just an obvious fool that our media uses to prop up and pretend as though we should valorize him when he's a literal Nazi. Like, it's crazy. Canadian Commie is the most based YouTube channel. Well, that's very kind of you to say, Vladimir. I appreciate that a lot, actually. That makes me feel good, because that's my goal. My goal is to constantly be telling the truth, to constantly be bringing evidence forward, to be using evidence as on how to think about what we're doing, and also just like commenting on the obvious collapse of Western civilization. And at this point, like, it's gotten so obvious that like I consider the people who are defending this system at this point to either have brain damage, and I don't mean that hyperbolically, I mean that they have brain damage, or to be like so deeply entrenched in a kind of Stockholm syndrome that they have no idea how to get out of it. Content, good to see you. Long Defiant, good to see you. Dragon Fruit, Gabriel, always a pleasure, guys. I'm so glad that you're here today. I'm so glad that you're here today. Long Defiant writes, will Biden be able to get through the State of the Union tonight? Yeah, I mean, here's my impression of the State of the Union. America, overseas, Israel good, God bless America, and like 15 hours of standing ovations, right? Just me, always a pleasure. Thank you for being here. There is a non-zero chance of an undeniable mental episode. I mean, they're probably going to get him amped up on something, right? Like they shoot him with adrenaline and Adderall before he goes out there, and he just reads from the script, and he'll probably have little mumbles, right? Like there's lots of that. There's lots of that with this guy, but like I don't know. John, any hope that in the coming federal budget from Chrystia Freeland will include something positive for the working poor and disabled? Well, one thing that's really good, I've got a lot of really good articles actually today, because I'm only doing the one stream this week, so I'm having to pack it all in. And one of the things that's happening is Joe Biden makes to propose big tax rises for billionaires and corporate America. Now, one of the things that I think is really important to remember is that the American propaganda machine is really good at bullshitting. Like, it's really good at lying. So take this with a grain of salt. Why is this ad here? That's so annoying that it's like right where it needs to be. Biden administration will target billionaires and corporate America with sweeping tax rises as part of a plan to cut the U.S. national debt and to boost the president in the polls ahead of the election. I mean, this has the same kind of, and of course, this empowers people like the powerful Linda McQuaig to write articles, as she has done for a long time, that Canada should support G20 plan to tax billionaires. I consider this to be mainly propagandistic, just like how when Biden's big infrastructure bill, I think this is the clearest example of how politicians are frauds and liars and essentially exist to act as courtiers for their developer owners. So the big infrastructure bill that the Biden administration did, most of that was used to widen roads, right? Like, it wasn't used to build metro, it wasn't used to build subways, it wasn't used to expand any kind of public infrastructure, really. It literally was like, that 16-lane highway, well, I know how we can fix the traffic in America. We'll make it 20 lanes. That'll really fix it. Now, you know. So it's just like, take $1 trillion, give it to your developer buddies, build some roads, solve nothing, cause more problems, jobs. We create jobs. And that's more or less how I think any of these taxes are going to work, and how any of this is going to work is that they'll raise like they'll put it up 1.2% over 20 years. All of the billionaires will just use their enormous power and wealth in order to shuffle everything around in the finance capital, so they'll actually end up spending less money on taxes. And the whole thing will be pitched at us if it's like, look, the number went up. We put the percentage of the number on a specific type of tax up 0.34% over 27,000 years. We're serious about raising taxes on billionaires. Yeah, and the headlines will be like, largest tax raise in 40 years. And it'll like, they'll be blaring it across the headlines as if Joe Biden is actually like, he's FDR on steroids, and oh my God. And when you actually look at it, it'll literally be a tax cut, right? That's how this is all going to work. Like, this is a system of extraction and abandonment. It's not a system that exists in order to actually help anybody. It doesn't exist to actually benefit anybody. It doesn't exist for any of that. It's a system that exists to extract as much wealth out of you and then abandon you. That's the point. And so when we're looking at this stuff, like, I'm not looking at these headlines being like, oh, well, hope on the horizon, everybody. This is obvious nonsense. Like, these people are fraudulent liars who should not be believed. And so they're trying to convince us that Joe Biden's going to raise taxes for billionaires in corporate America, well-meaning people who actually still believe that the electoral system, that there is an electoral system. Like, I like Linda McQuaig, right? I like Linda McQuaig. I've read her stuff. I think she's extremely knowledgeable. I think she argues forcibly. I think that if the leader of our country sounded like Linda McQuaig and was moving forward on policy decisions in the way that Linda McQuaig does, I would be like, oh, this might actually be serious. But there's a reason why Linda McQuaig is relegated to articles on like page 54 in the editorial section of the Toronto Star, while the people who actually run the country will never, ever, ever do anything meaningful whatsoever, right? So you can have your free speech, but you can go speak to the people who are living in the tents, right? The where I diverge, right, and where I will always diverge from people like Linda, God bless her heart, because again, I think she's a well-meaning person who's doing everything she can out in the world, right, is that she still thinks there's an electoral solution. She still thinks this is just a misunderstanding and we're all going to come together and we're all going to have a conversation and then we're going to just push forward policy that's going to work for the best of the people, right? No, the system is already dead. We live in a corpse. We're pulling the corpse apart. Anytime they release any headline or proposition or thought that says, oh, hey, we're doing something to benefit you, it's obviously a lie and you're dumb to believe it. When Chrystia Freeland was first appointed finance minister, her mandate letter from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called on her to identify additional ways to tax extreme wealth inequality. Presumably, this would have been a task she took up with gusto. Probably not, though. Right? Like, probably not. The Liberals are really good at pretending like they give a shit. That's like their whole skill set, is pretending like they give a shit and like really like casting a reel saying we give a shit and then spending like 20 years like just like pulling back on that and being like, and like, are you ever gonna pull that fish in? Are you ever gonna do that? And the answer is obviously no, right? They're obviously not. We shouldn't be surprised by it by somebody like Chrystia Freeland. Her grandfather was a Nazi propagandist after all. She learned from the best. Monsieur Balls on Twitch, good to see you, my man. Odra Chess says, hey, hello, good to see you, Odra Chess. Hope you're here to be beautiful. 1000% absolute pleasure, good to see you. Yep. Well, I mean, yeah, Isaac, like, use the money to repair potholes, but they don't. Like, that's not what it's about. Look, you can just go to cities like Montreal. You can just walk to downtown Toronto. It's obvious what's happening instantaneously, right? Developers purchase politicians to give them money to do long-term construction projects that do not end, right? And the solution to the problem of these developers not ending the project ever is obviously give the developer more money, right? So they've got the populace in a feedback loop, and it's just a perpetual, forever feedback loop of constant construction leading to nowhere with no solution or no end in sight, right? Just siphon as much money out of the public as you possibly can. Long Defiant writes, the United States is currently adding $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days, and people wonder why Bitcoin reached its all-time high. Yeah, I mean, like, Bitcoin is nothing. I actually agree with Warren Buffett on that. Warren Buffett has been very outspoken about how Bitcoin is a pointless, like, it's like trading Pog, right? It's like trading Pogs. Like, that is what Bitcoin is. It's this generation's Pog. Right? That when we were little, when we were little kids, Snake, good to see you. When we were little kids, we would trade pogs with one another, and some pogs had certain value, and these pogs had other value. And it's like the same with like baseball cards and Magic the Gathering cards and all this stuff. we ascribe a certain value to them, but these things are ultimately valueless. And I don't mean they're precious beyond belief. I mean that they have no value. They're worthless, right? You can't eat them. You can't build anything with them. You can't do anything with them. The only reason why they have a value is because people want them. And the only reason why people want them is because they're easy to trick. It's easy to deceive people to get involved in some like weird little kooky cult thing because it's what our brains are fixed to do. We like little weird little kooky cults and we want to be in on the next big thing and fear of missing out and all this kind of nonsense. But when you actually look at Bitcoin, it's not for anything. It's just for having. I've got all this Bitcoin. Oh, look at me. You can't do anything with it. And the whole thing is basically going to result in a big, gigantic collapse. The people who are the scam artists in it, like your Kevin O'Leary types, right? They're going to make off with a bunch of money and get something valuable, something actual out of it. And just leave people holding the bag, essentially. And all these signs that you see around town that say, buy Bitcoin here and all this, they'll all just take them down. And it'll be like when we were trading Pogs, right? And everybody will have their little collection of Pogs and be like, hey, remember Pogs? But like nobody's going to eat Pogs. Nobody's going to trade Pogs for anything. There's not any actual value involved in Pogs, right? How you doing there in Canada? I'm doing. It's suspiciously beautiful today. Yeah. They're paying 5% interest on their debt. I mean, like, has a new bookshelf. Good to see you. It's another product of communism done it. Yeah, my favorite thing to see. You see this a lot on like Joe Rogan clips. Every time Joe Rogan says it's communism, he's talking about finance capitalism, right? It's sort of silly, right? Sort of silly. Kaz, just came across you. Glad to see some other cool Canadians. Fantastic. Hey, tell people I exist. Like the stream. Do all the stuff. Hit the bells, hit the whistles. I'm glad to hear that new people are finding this stream because boy howdy. I could use just the energy and the support. It'd be great. Vancouver's a beautiful place. Absolutely. Absolutely. Liberals are going to lose the next election. I think that's absolutely positive. Nor do I think there's anything they can do. Yeah, John, I'm doing taxes and every client I've had works 3 to 4 jobs and most of their income goes toward rent. Some rely on food banks to eat. Yeah. Like it's a dead system. Right? Like and nobody wants to acknowledge it. Like we're just at the point right now. Here, Orger Chess is asking, how's the situation there? This is the situation in the West generally, but Canada's no exception. It's faster in Canada because we have less population. Right? That's the real situation. And there are some other things, like we've opened up our housing market to criminals essentially and allow money laundering to happen. We've turned our housing market into a way for rich psychopaths to launder their money. But like the situation that's going on in the West is that the system of capital is dead, like it's over. We are currently in a feudal system. We are living in a corpse, right? People kind of think we're in a decline, and I'm like, no, this is over. Like people think the building is falling over, and I'm like, no, building's fallen over for a long time. People think that it's like, oh, I'm an old man and I'm gonna lay down and then die, and I'm like, no, the man's been dead for a long, long, long time. We're just at that tipping point. We're at a tipping point right now, and I see it, and I think people intrinsically do understand it. That it's inside of them and that they do feel it and that there is a lot of energy, and it's especially coming out of the younger generation. I think that they're not willing to even tolerate this insane idea that this system is worth anything anymore. So anybody under the age of 20, you start talking about the positives of capitalism and they literally just roll their eyes and like think that you're a psycho instantaneously. Like just like you have a baby brain if you're talking that way to somebody under the age of 20. And we're just waiting for the corpse to start to smell. That's really what it is. That the corpse is dead, right? It's in the room, it's dead, right? And there are still people walking around as if it isn't. But eventually, and by eventually I mean it's coming like very soon, like very, very soon, the corpse is going to start to smell. and people are not going to be able to deny it anymore, because nobody is going to be able to exist in that state of delusion anymore. I mean, I would argue that most of us shouldn't be doing that. Like this, every major city is loaded with tents. You've got mass poverty everywhere you look. The housing market is exploded and completely decimated. Quote unquote inflation, i.e., corporations gouging us, is just become endemic everywhere you go. There's no and the only people who have and the people who are in power are offering non-solutions, right? That they're not even interested in pointing at what is obviously the problem, which is that rich people are obviously extracting wealth from the society and then turning around and buying, like Jeffrey Epstein, pedophile islands with it. Like, that's very clearly on a 1 + 1 = 2, welcome to kindergarten kind of a level, exactly what's happening. And people are still pretending as though it's, oh, this is very complex, there's a lot of, it's very multifaceted, and, you know, you can't reduce it down to, yes, obviously you can, because there's, it's like I walk into a room, and there's, like, thousands of corpses in the room, and Jason Voorhees is standing there drenched in blood with his hockey mask, holding a machete, and he's, like, currently stabbing someone, right? And there are, like, people groaning and moaning all over him, being like, no, Jason, please stop killing us. And one person sees me, and it's like, oh, Jason's killing us. Please come and help us, and all this. And the person is standing beside me, being like, man, I can't understand what's going on here. These people are just lazy, I guess. Like, that's the level of, like, demented delusion that we're encountering now. And I really am at a point where I'm no longer willing to tolerate it. Like, I think that if you're going to defend this system at this point, you either have a mental illness, like a significant and serious mental illness, you are evil, like you're just an evil, demonic sort of person that gets off on people's suffering, and gaslighting people is part of that getting off on it, or you're so deep into a system of Stockholm syndrome, like you're just worshiping daddy, basically, that it's indistinguishable from being evil, right? It's just like when you watch a show and there's like a henchman, and then right at the end of the movie, that henchman flips sides because he realizes, oh, I was on the wrong side the whole time, right? Like that's the best I think that you can achieve if you're going to be on the side of capitalism, is that right when it decides to put on the Führer outfit and just start walking around with the Nazi salutes, you just go, oh, wait a minute, and you flip sides. That's the best that these people can do at this stage in the game. So it's just getting totally fucking brutal. Seen a couple documentaries about the homeless situation. It's absolutely shocking. Most of the time it's because of health insurance. Yeah, I mean, look, how do you know the system is psychopathic and that everybody is... And that the people defending it are psychopaths? That most situations and most problems, most social issues that are happening in the society would be solved, and could be solved simply by solving them, and it would be cheaper to solve them, right? So, for example, Finland stood up and said, there are homeless people, we have empty houses, put homeless people in houses, right? And what did they find? It was cheaper. Saved them a bunch of money. They didn't have to police these people. They didn't need emergency services. They didn't need food banks. They didn't need to erect entire systems to deal with homelessness. They just eliminated it. And how did they eliminate it? They took a homeless person and they put them in a house. That's it. No big like, oh, how do we, oh my God, it's such a complex, difficult, I can't possibly, but they didn't earn it. Homeless person into house. Homeless person into house. Oh, you have no food? Here is food. Right? Just 1 + 1 = 2. Welcome to kindergarten. Right? And that's where our society is at this point. Except, like, we're full of, like, psychopaths like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson who are there specifically to squall like children and pretend like it's complicated when it's not at all. Bread Bunny, good to see you. And and we have entered this period of deep stupidity where and intentional stupidity, right? Intentional stupidity. And the intentional stupidity is the last vestige. It's the last place to go. There's nowhere else to go, right? You have to be intentionally stupid to continue defending the system. You have to essentially become a religious acolyte. There's just nothing left. And so, the most powerful voices in the conversation and the most powerful pro-capitalist voices have to be stupid, right? They just have to be stupid. Yeah, my favorite generation, good to see you, by the way, is when people say, like, oh, the ethics of the situation, like, what is ethical about keeping people homeless, right? Like, fundamentally, the people who are trying to talk about ethics are trying to keep people homeless. That's the darkest, most bleak, evil thing that like, not the darkest, obviously, but like, if your quote unquote ethical position is people should be homeless, then we don't need to listen to you anymore. It's over, right? In a very basic way, we just don't need to tolerate that any longer. And the this idea that it's somehow complicated and that there's somehow going to be, well, if you do that, then people, well, what people won't have any meaning anymore, and I'm the one that gets to decide what is and is not meaningful as a psychopath attempting to keep people poor, right? Like, it's just these nightmare, like, fucking sociopaths and schizophrenics are being thrown in front of us as actual intellectuals when it's so obvious that they're frauds, right? It's just obvious that they're frauds. And at this point, anybody standing up and saying anything other than take food, give to hungry, take empty house, give to homeless, right? Is just demented at this point. And we don't need to discuss it any other way. I keep reading right-wingers. There's your first clue, mate. Like, a right-winger is like a fairly demented individual right on the face of it. Keep people poor, remove housing from people, strip people, the woke, right? Like Richard, I'm going to help you out with something right now. I'm going to clarify something for you, and it's going to crystallize something. And the minute I say it, you're going to go out in the world and you're going to see it, and you're going to be like, oh shit, I kind of wish I hadn't heard that, because now I see it, and it's really turning the country into a Nazi state really quickly, right? Every single time these guys say the word woke, they mean black, right? Like, it's really obvious that that's the case. And just replace the word woke with the word black, and you're going to see that we're back in the 1940s and 50s again. You're going to see that we're in the segregation era again, in terms of their rhetoric especially, right? Like, these guys are walking around talking about woke issues and woke policies and woke this and woke that, and it's all black. It's all black people, right? And anytime they deviate into attacking trans people or attacking somebody off on the side, it is a way to disempower the black community and black people in their society. Because the goal of the right, fundamentally, is to reenact slavery. That's the goal. Like, the fundamental basement goal is to ensure that slavery thrives in America. And they're doing a pretty good job of it. You can take a look at their prison system to see that's the case. But to directly answer your question, right? So frauds and losers on the right who don't have the intellectual right to actually be listened to or heard or be taken seriously. And the only reason they are taken seriously is because there's a lot of bigots and racists in the world. The millions of deaths caused by communism. Great. When? Where? At what point? Right? And they don't know. And they can't talk about it. Right? Because they don't know anything and they're illiterate. And when they do talk about it, they reveal very quickly that they're basically drenched in Nazi propaganda and they're super dumb, right? And that they're not literate, they're not intelligent, they don't know anything, they don't read anybody, they don't make arguments, right? They just say these things, right? Like, it's like they're essentially trying to pass off a your mama joke as knowledge. That's basically what these guys, to an individual, no exceptions, right? These people are frauds across the board. Because the whole point is to try to convince you, and their new tactic today, right? The new tactic that they're constantly using is that communism and Nazism is the same. That's their new tactic, because their hope is that you don't know anything, right? You like, and I'm not saying that to insult you. It's just the truth. You don't know anything. You've never looked into the Soviet Union. You've never looked into communism in a serious way, right? And so you don't know anything. And so they just bring up like some random event that you don't know anything about and try to convince you that it's this horrible intentional thing that they definitely did. And then that's the same as the Holocaust and World War II, right? So these Nazi apologists are constantly trying to besmirch the name of communism by comparing it to like capitalist atrocities that are for sure rank amongst the worst that the world has ever seen, and trying to pretend that defending yourself against those atrocities is the same as committing those atrocities. And to do this, they just basically use the Nazi propaganda, and it's for a very specific goal. It's to make sure that should the Nazis take power again, and should the Nazis begin striding around the country, you won't turn to their enemies, which are the communists. You'll stay an quote-unquote enlightened centrist, and the position of the enlightened centrist is that I have no principles and I bend the knee to power. That's centrism. So it's so the thing I keep asking people anytime they want to come in here and talk about well, communism killed a million people. When, where, at what time, right? And then you find out pretty quickly these people don't know anything, because they don't know anything. And they'll reference like fraudulent books like the Black Buddha book of communism or any of this kind of stuff. We got somebody in the Twitch chat pretending like they know things. There's plenty of utility coins. There's a file coin, which gives decentralized storage. Probably going to go to a whole bunch of stuff. It's not just memes and stores of value. The right just trot out talking points they've heard in capitalist mainstream media. Yeah. And I mean, when you actually investigate any of this stuff, a lot of it is just essentially Nazi propaganda, right? And like pretty shocking stuff. And I've gotten to the point now that like, even if their claims were true, which they're not, obviously, these people are fraudulent liars who lie fraudulently for a living. But if they were true, right, communism would still be better than Nazism. Right, on a one-to-one level. Like, if you were to write all the pros and write all the cons out, you'd just be like, yeah, like World War II was because of the Nazis. If people like Henry Ford, right, American industrial capitalist, right, provided the engines to the Nazis. He got the Iron Cross from the Nazis for doing so, right? Nazism was extremely popular in America. Adolf Hitler was Times Man of the Year twice in a row, for God's sakes. Like, the Americans loved Adolf Hitler. They worked with Adolf Hitler. They funded Adolf Hitler. They gave Adolf Hitler lots of money and wealth and power. They armed Adolf Hitler. They gave him guns and weapons and engines and computing equipment in order to enact the Holocaust, right? That American capital was deeply entrenched and deeply tied into the idea that Adolf Hitler and the Nazis should be powerful and should do the concentration camps and should do these sorts of things, right? It's very, very obvious that that's the case. And and so modern day losers need to pretend like all of that didn't happen, and need to omit. Like, I recently, and I might do a video about it, we'll see, but I recently watched Superman Red Sun, right? This is like a comic that came out in the 90s, and they decided to finally make a movie about it. And I think that these people should be incarcerated. I think that they should be considered criminals. Propagandists of the highest order. But first and foremost, they literally eliminate the Nazis, right? The whole concept of the film, right, Superman Red Sun, is that you have what if Superman landed in Soviet Russia instead of America? That's the whole premise of it. So Superman came up in the Soviet Union instead of in Kansas, right? What would have been different? How would the story have gone? All this kind of stuff. And the very first thing that the story does is just eliminates the Nazis. There were no Nazis. What are you talking about? Nazis? Who's Adolf Hitler? What are you talking about? right? Right away, right away, the liberals and liberal propaganda and CIA propagandists just omit capitalists' greatest mass murderers, right? Like Adolf Hitler was a mass murdering capitalist psychopath, right? Very obviously, very clearly. And to eliminate him from the discourse should be a crime. Like, I think that people should go to fucking jail for that. Yeah, we're going to say goodbye to the guy saying Jews fucked up Russia, too. Goodbye, my man. Maybe try not to be such a huge fucking bigot. Get the fuck out of here, you loser. Man, there's so many fucking dumbass losers in the world. Like, maybe try to think with your brain, right? Like, get the energy past your mouth, right? Energy is coming from your balls, right? Because you're essentially a walking cock, right? Get that energy out of your mouth, right? Send it to your brain, and maybe let it live in your brain, and maybe a little bit beyond if you're capable of that, right? But definitely shut your mouth, because you're obviously just a walking dick. Yeah, millions of death allegedly caused by communism equals evil. Millions of death by capitalism, colonialism, badass and cool, skill issue. Yeah, exactly, XD. Yeah, exactly. And like, there's no parity, right? There's no parity whatsoever. That what the capitalists do and what they constantly do over and over and over and over again is they look at a complex issue. They look at a situation where something serious is happening. So for example, the land reform situation, right? That they look at the land reform situation and they cast it as if it's like innocent, wholesome, delightful peasants, hobbits, like Frodo Baggins, just living peacefully on the land, and the evil Soviets came along. And when you actually investigate it, you're like, no, the relationships that were going on there were more like the Confederate South, right? That Stalin was dealing with his Confederate South in the kulaks. That's what was going on during the land reform movement, is that he saw slave systems in his society. He wrote about the slave systems. You can read about the slave systems. And like Lincoln and the North in American history, he decided to get rid of these slave systems that they inherited from the Tsars and from a period of monarchy. So if you are going to condemn Stalin for the land reform movement, then you have to condemn Lincoln. And you have to side with the Confederates. Because that's essentially your argument, and that's essentially what you're saying. But the people who say these things don't know what they're saying, because they don't know anything about the subject. They just like buzzwords, and they just like to say things. They don't know anything about communism. They don't know anything about the subject, right? Because if they actually knew something, this is something I've really come to understand. And I actually started writing about it recently, which is that capitalism in the West is fundamentally a religious ideology, right? It is in no way a science. It can't be a science. Because if someone was to actually investigate capitalism as a scientist and was attempting to be intellectually honest about it, you'd become a Marxist, right? That's exactly where you would end up. Karl Marx was the guy who really went through it and really criticized it and really broke it apart. And if you were to attempt to approach capitalism as a science, even as somebody who is attempting to pretend as though capitalism has any benefits or any of that, you'd at least have to confront this guy. You'd at least have to talk about this guy and write about this guy and discuss this guy. But if you're unwilling to do that, well, then in what way can you be? Like, it'd be like saying I'm a physicist, but I never read Einstein. I don't know anything about Isaac Newton, right? It'd be like saying like I'm the premier expert in calculus, but I have no idea what Isaac Newton wrote about calculism. And it's that scale of illiteracy. And so what's happened, because we have to obliterate actual scientific observation, we have to actually obliterate all of this stuff from our consciousness, because to engage in a scientific pursuit of capitalism means to understand what capitalism is, which means to strive to get away from it or be a psychopath, right? Those are your two options. So instead, people just cede that territory and become religious. They just become a religious acolyte about capitalism, and they just make these insane, over-the-top, ridiculous statements that have no rooting in anything that's observable with no evidence, no sources, or anything. And it is because Daddy told me. The high priests of capitalism came down and said, capitalism has eliminated more poverty than anywhere. And you'll ask them for a source, and they'll be like, here is an IMF report. Look how the poverty has gone down. And then you delve into those numbers, and you're like, all of that poverty reduction happened in communist China. All of it. Right? And in fact, when you look at the places where capitalism actually is, and capitalism's thriving, poverty is spiking through the roof. And the only reason why the overall poverty numbers are dropping is because China has 1.5 billion people. Like, we're just like this society and this culture of total dimwits, and we're supposed to just go along with this shit. And it's gotten so blatant and so obvious that anybody can see it now. And we're just starting to put together that like, oh, maybe Daddy was lying. Oh, you mean they lied to us about the mass destruction weapons of mass destruction during 9/11 and all that? Oh man, well, what else are they lying about? Oh my God, they're lying about that. They're lying about that. They're lying. Oh fuck, they're liars. Oh man, these people genuinely used to argue in front of us that black people were inferior and that slavery was proof of that. Oh wow, right? Like. There's no foundation to any of this. There's no foundation to the way the West thinks about the world. And the entire rest of the world is starting to see through it. And there's very clear examples for why they should. And they should get away from it. So the idea that some fascist right-winger who's literally pro-genocide, arguing in front of everybody that genocide is good or not happening, should be taken seriously, while simultaneously clutching onto a book that they claim holds the one truth of creation, even though it has fucking magic in it, like a Harry Potter book. And then suddenly, these are the people that we should listen to when they say communism did. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I wouldn't trust these guys to take care of my child for an evening. Like, I wouldn't trust these guys with fucking anything. Like, these people are doing everything they can to impoverish everybody, make the situation worse. Like, guys like Ben Shapiro will literally say in front of hundreds of millions of people, the solution to our problems is to flood the streets with cops. Like, these guys are obvious fascists, right? Obvious fascists. So why are we listening to what the obvious fascists think about the people who constantly defeat them, which are the communists, right? Like, and they'll keep losing to communists because at the end of the day, hey, maybe we should help one another and maybe we should love one another. Defeats, hey, maybe let's round people up and put them into concentration camps, right? That's how this actually works on this plane of reality. Love wins, right? That's the hard truth about these deep, dark, narcissistic, psychopathic capitalists, is that they've got all of this paper money and they've got all of this momentum and they've got all of this they're winning the game of Monopoly, but love wins, right? Like the Roman Empire fell, we still read the Bible. And nobody gives a fucking shit about almost anything that happened in the Roman Empire, except like dweebs on the internet. So it's just like this it's just this constant unfolding of stupidity now, and we're in a very, very dim-witted age, and it's going to get like, and when I say this, understand, right? What I am about to say here is not a prediction, right? If you walked up to, if I gave you a photo and it was a building that was like this, right? And I said, well, what's the next thing? What's going to happen next? And you said, well, it's going to go like that, right? Like, it's not a prediction. It's an observation. Obviously, the building is falling over. Obviously, that's happening. Like, yep, very clear. I have the capacity to understand basic things. So when I talk about about this next thing that I'm talking about, it's not predictive. Like, none of this is actually going to be predictive. Like, we are in a major collapse. The corpse is dead and it is decomposing around us. that we are facing extraordinary wealth extraction. Meanwhile, countries that are actually like, maybe we should actually make plans, and maybe we should actually think about our societies and have discussions about our societies and attempt to build unifying processes in our societies, are going to continue stabilizing as we start to decompose. And it's going to get extremely obvious. Like, this is an article that I would love to read. And I took one look at the headline. It's from the Maple, which I trust as a source. Nazi Parliament Scandal. Ongoing fallout leaves unanswered questions. So just to remind everybody, right? When Zelensky was in town, in our parliament here in Canada, we decided to put a Nazi in front of him and have the Speaker of the House say, oh, this guy fought against the Russians during World War II. My favorite part about that is that when he read it, he was like, whoa, this guy's a fucking Nazi. Like, he might as well have said it. And everybody was like, yeah, a Nazi. Hooray, Nazism. We love Nazis. And the Chrystia Freeland was my favorite. She literally was like, oh, yeah, Nazis. My grandpa was a Nazi. Yeah. And immediately social media started picking up, because the media is incapable. Like, they serve these people, right? They're not interested in reporting anything seriously. And so social media started to be like, oh, this guy's a Nazi. Hey, everybody, this guy's a fucking, they honored a Nazi in Parliament. And the mainstream media kicked into high gear and basically started saying, what an accident. What an oopsie-badoopsie. What a smizmatic, irresponsible thing to do, right? As if the government doesn't vet people who are presented to foreign dignitaries, right? Like, to believe this narrative was to admit in front of everybody that you're a gullible moron who should not be trusted with anything. Right? Like if I had a friend who literally was like, oh, they did an oopsie-doo and they apologized for it, I guess that's okay. I'd be like, I'm not going to trust you to open up a bottle of beer. Like, you're going to take your fucking eye out. You're so fucking stupid. And so for people who are not morons, we've been constantly asking, hey, how did this come to be that you took a Nazi and put him in front of Zelensky, you know, a guy who works with Nazis in Ukraine? And so now, hopefully, the Maple is going to provide us with some answers on that question. It's been 5 months since Canadian MPs gave standing ovations to Yaroslav Hunka, a Waffen-SS veteran. 5 months after Canadian members of Parliament gave 2 standing ovations to Yaroslav Hunka, a 98-year-old Waffen-SS veteran who was introduced as a Canadian hero, last fall's Nazi Parliament scandal continues to prompt difficult questions for the Trudeau government and Canadian institutions. Most recently, the Ottawa Citizen revealed that the scandal caused Canadian Heritage to postpone the long-planned unveiling of Ottawa's controversial Victims of Communism monument. Right. The Victims of Communism monument is, of course, an expansion of the Nazi project, right, to demonize communism, like the Black Book of Communism. The Victims of Communism movement has been heavily critiqued because what they'll do is they'll take people who, like, died of natural causes or, like, died in a landslide, and they'll be like, that's a victim of communism, right? They'll put literal Nazis on their lists. They'll be like, these people were Nazis that fought against the communists. They're victims of communism. So to take victim of communism movements seriously is essentially to engage in Nazi apologencia. You're basically saying the Nazis didn't deserve to be destroyed by the communists, even though they were fucking lunatics. The Maple reported that the unveiling would be delayed back in late October, days before hundreds of dignitaries and monument sponsors were expected to attend the formal event. That's a bit of a shame because we would have seen who the Nazis were in the society. I think that's why they canceled it, because it became really obvious that these people are Nazis and supporting Nazis and applauding Nazis and that they like Nazis. And so to have a Nazi event where they did something that was so obviously Nazi would really out them as Nazis. At the time, Canadian Heritage spokespeople would only say that the unveiling had been postponed to ensure the monument was compatible with what it regarded as Canadian values. Of course, these people are Nazis, so they think Nazism is compatible with Canadian values. I mean, historically accurate. The Citizen's report said that planning for the public ceremony came to a halt on October 13th, 3 weeks after Hunka was honored in Parliament. Records obtained by the Citizen showed that a Canadian Heritage Project manager responsible for the monument was concerned about the possibility of Nazi collaborators being included on the monument's Wall of Remembrance, a problem which she acknowledged had already been highlighted in the media. Yeah, you think? Like, we keep putting Nazis on our lists of people who were well, let's get rid of the Nazis. Okay, we'll get rid of that. Okay, fine, we'll get rid of the people who died of like natural causes. Okay, fine, we'll get rid of the slavers. Okay, fine, we'll get rid of the imperialists. Okay, fine, we'll get rid of the and basically the list will essentially be like the only person on the list will be Joseph Stalin, and it'll literally be, quote, "I've tried to resign 4 times, you guys. Please, I just want to sleep." Victim of communism, Joseph Stalin. The same documents indicated that Canadian government officials had determined other names listed for remembrance on the monument were SS volunteers or Nazi collaborators. The exact number of problematic commendations was redacted from the documents, probably because it was the majority, right? Probably because they were literally being like, yes, victim of communism, Adolf Hitler. Yes, let's all stand and remember in silence those who have fallen to the specter of communism, Adolf Hitler. The same documents indicated that oh, no, I already read that. The issue also appears to have attracted the attention of Global Affairs Canada, which warned their counterparts at Canadian Heritage that an improperly vetted commemorative list could lead to significant controversy in Canada and abroad. Yeah, it would out all their Nazis, right? It would really out all their Nazis. If this is a joke, my man, on Twitch, there's a guy named Yaroslav Hunka being like, I don't see a problem. If that's a joke, well done, you're banned. Get out of here, you fucking Nazi. Hope something bad happens to you. GAC further noted that anti-communists and anti-Soviet individuals and military units active during the Second World War were often Nazi collaborators and war criminals. Issues surrounding the monument have raised concerns for several years. In 2021, CBC News reported that virtual commemorative bricks purchased as part of a fundraising effort for the monument had been dedicated to a variety of Nazi collaborators, suspected war criminals, and Second World War-era fascists. These included Roman Shukevich, a Ukrainian ultranationalist believed to have been responsible for the massacres of about 100,000 Poles, as well as thousands of Jews, Russians, and Ukrainians in Western Ukraine during the Second World War. Shukevich is commemorated with a statue at the Ukrainian Youth Unity Complex in North Edmonton. His statue is protected by a security system paid for by the federal government. We love Nazis. The rationale for the government funding was that the statue, which has been targeted with anti-fascist graffiti, needed to be protected from hate crimes. Nazis have no rights. You can't commit a hate crime against Nazis. The victims of communism's monument's public unveiling has been postponed to an undetermined date in 2024. I super look forward to seeing who is at that event. That's going to be my favorite. We're going to see who the Nazis are in our society pretty blatantly, and I'll be reporting on these Nazis as though they are Nazis, because they are Nazis. In keeping with other public monument unveiling ceremonies in Ottawa, a Canadian Heritage spokesperson confirmed to the Maple that the public will not be invited to attend. Nothing like a secret Nazi ceremony to really entrench in the minds of people that you guys aren't Nazis. Keeping it secret. Good job. Back in 2007, the monument was initially slated to cost an estimated $1.5 million, drawn entirely from private donations from Nazis and Nazi collaborators. It now carries a price tag of $7.5 million, with the additional costs covered by public funds. Isn't that great? Isn't that great that we're all paying taxes to this fucking Nazi shit? More fallout. The monument's delay is not the only piece of fallout to have emerged from the Nazi Parliament scandal. Last month, reports confirmed that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had invited Hunka to attend a rally in Toronto to support Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, who was in Canada on an official visit. The revelation contrasted sharply with statements made in the immediate wake of the scandal, when the Prime Minister's office planted the blame for Hunka's invite to Parliament entirely on Anthony Rota, who resigned as House Speaker as a result. I wish that Hunka had totally backstabbed everybody. I wish he had been like, what? I read what was on the card. I didn't know who this guy was. These guys just gave me a card and I read it. I wish he had done it, but obviously he's not going to do that, or else they'll reveal that he went to Jeffrey Epstein's island or something. The PMO said Hunka was recommended for an invitation to the Toronto rally by the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress, right? The Ukrainian-Canadian Congress houses a lot of Nazis. Critics have accused the organization of representing a section of the dysphoria community that has attempted to revise the reputations of Second World War-era Ukrainian collaborators. In 2017, UCC announced a $25,000 donation to support the creation of the Victims of Communism Monument. The organization did not respond to a request for comment from the Maple for this article. In 2019 interview with Radio Canada, historian John Paul Himka explained that the UCC represents the section of the Ukrainian-Canadian community that was responsible for the creation of the Shukovich Monument in Edmonton, right? Because they're fucking Nazis. According to Himka, that section of the Ukrainian-Canadian community has been active in advocating a revisionist perspective of the history of the Shukovich-led Ukrainian insurgent army and the faction of the wartime organization of Ukrainian nationalists led by Stepan Bandera, who was a far-right Ukrainian ultra-nationalist and Nazi sympathizer. Not so much a sympathizer as a collaborator, right? He worked with the Nazis to erect concentration camps. Shukovich and Bandera and the interrelated organizations they led were Nazi collaborators and are widely viewed as being responsible for some of the most brutal ethnic cleansing campaigns of the war. That sounds just so super good. A move to transparency. News reports about Trudeau's knowledge of Hunka's invitation to Parliament came on the heels of Immigration Minister Mark Miller's announcement in early February that the government was releasing previously redacted portions of the Rodal Report. The report, prepared by historian Alti Rodal, provided a historical accounting for how suspected war criminals made their way into Canada after the Second World War. Rodal prepared the report as part of the 1986 Deschênes Commission, an investigation into suspected war criminals living in Canada. However, only about 15 previously redacted pages from over 600-page-long document were actually released last month, and much of the information contained in those pages had already been known for years. Despite this, Miller claimed his office had made the vast majority of the Rodal Report publicly available. The Rodal Report had been listed as secret until as recently as 1997. But search results from online news archives revealed that at least some of the report's contents had been available for public scrutiny and widely reported on at least 10 years earlier. Portions of the report remain redacted, despite Miller's plea that more can and should be done to provide transparency. In the press release that accompanied the Rodal Report announcement, Miller was also quoted saying, "This release is one part of the Government of Canada's ongoing commitment to transparency and to reviewing what additional historical records related to the investigation of war crimes can be released. Engagement with affected communities is ongoing, and the government is steadfast in ensuring that Canadians feel safe." My question, of course, is why are we protecting Nazis and the reputation of Nazis? We better redact that. That would be embarrassing if people found out that that person was a Nazi. Despite this apparent commitment to transparency as it pertains to the archival record, the Canadian press recently reported that the government's War Crimes Program, which was launched in 1998 to prevent war criminals from finding safe haven in Canada, hasn't updated the public on its activities in 8 years and has only issued 2 reports since 2008. We don't need to report on all these Nazis that live in Canada. The program's budget has also remained unchanged from its launch up until 2008. The program, which included cooperation between the Immigration and Justice Departments, as well as the Canadian Border Services Agency and the RCMP, issued annual reports on its activities and the outcomes of hundreds of investigations into suspected war criminals or people credibly accused of committing crimes against humanity. The program was launched more than a decade after the Deschamps Commission issued its final report. After an investigative report on the American weekly news program 60 Minutes revived interest on the issue in 1997. Titled Canada's Dark Secret, the 60 Minutes program reported that the Simon Wiesenthal Center had supplied an American private investigator with the names of suspected war criminals. The investigator was able to locate hundreds of them living peacefully and openly across Canada. The same report indicated that Canadian officials had made essentially no effort to find or prosecute any of the suspected war criminals, even in the aftermath of the Deschamps Commission. Most significantly, historian Irving Abella told journalist Mike Wallace that former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau had admitted that Canada didn't pursue the war criminal issue because he was concerned it would lead to conflict between Eastern European diaspora communities and Canada's Jewish population. The recent release of the Rodal Report's previously redacted sections confirmed what the report more than a quarter century ago. The move was the first instance of the Trudeau government purportedly following through on a statement the Prime Minister made shortly after the Nazi Parliament scandal, in which he said senior bureaucrats were reviewing the Deschamps Commission report with an aim to make more of it public. The release, nonetheless, falls short of what representatives of Canada's Jewish community, its Eastern European diaspora communities victimized by the Nazis, and their collaborators, as well as historians, archivists, and Holocaust scholars, have demanded of the Canadian government for nearly 40 years. The issue is far from settled. Yeah, we love Nazis, man. We're huge. We just love it, right? Gross, just got a crypto ad. Yeah, buy in. Now's the time to buy in, Dragon Fruit. You gotta buy in now to crypto. This is the moment. Crypto will never be better than it is right now. Hold the bag. Yeah, hold the bag. Absolutely. Oh, we got somebody literally typing in Russian in the Twitch stream. I hope you're saying nice things. I hope that's good stuff you're saying there, mate. Like, the Nazis have infiltrated Western nations. They are in high places. Yeah, they were put there, right? You can read Operation Paperclip. They were put there. Like, it's not like they started from the bottom and worked their way up, you know? Like, they were put there by us. like we love Nazis. We're like, for goodness sakes, in the 60s, the head of NATO, like the person who was leading NATO was a former Nazi, like Adolf Hausinger. So this idea that it's just nobody gives a fuck in the West. Like, yeah, of course we love Nazis. Yeah, we've always loved Nazis, you know? What, you think because Indiana Jones shot some Nazis and everyone went like, ha, he shot those Nazis, that like the actual owners of the country were like, yeah, Nazis are actually bad, actually. No, we love them. We've always loved them, right? It's we fund them, we give them wealth, we give them money, we give them positions of status, we let them run institutions, right? We just, you know, you just don't talk about the Nazi thing, you know? It's just something you just don't do. You know, everybody was a Nazi at one point or another. You know, we were all Nazis at some point. Long Defiant writes, I think this is a response, so I think it's a response to Bethany. Eric, good to see you. Bethany, good to see you too. Ukrainians aren't exactly the whitest people in Europe. It's crazy they're going towards Nazism, considering Hitler called them mongrel mixed trash or something to that effect. Yeah, since when are Nazis rational? Right? Like literally their position is, we're the best and everyone should bow to us because we're awesome. Like, it's the kind of thing that like an 8-year-old bully comes up with, and you just kind of are like, I'm the best. Yeah, we're the best, and we're gonna get together, and the people who look like me are gonna get together. We're gonna be the best, and we're gonna fight you. It's their whole fucking ideology. Like, that's their whole thing. And we're all just like, yeah, this is a serious thing. Like this is definitely the height of Western civilization right here. Long Defiant writes, "It's not easy. You have to be very intentional. I was eating mayonnaise until I realized it had soybean." Oh, you're talking about like, yeah, like our food is poison, right? Like our food is poison. There's just no getting away from it. That like if you eat anything that goes through any process of any sort, you just have to assume it's poisonous. I think that we should all stop eating wheat. Like our wheat is obviously poisoned. I read an article on here not that long ago where most of our wheat is just loaded with a chemical that makes everybody impotent. It's obviously unhealthy garbage. It's people should go to jail for this shit. Like it's really, really obvious that our food has been poisoned, and we're just like, yeah, it's just normal. It's just a normal thing to have an entire food supply be systemically poisoned, so that capitalists can make 0.2% more profits over 50 years. Yeah, it's normal. Just normal. John, you missed my comment. You've overcome long COVID. Ding, 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 ding. I'm glad to hear that, Eric, man. That's really good. You've been struggling with that for a long, long, long time. Long, long time, my man. This last weekend, I got so sick. I thought it was COVID. Uh, and the whole time I was like, oh man, I hope I don't get long COVID. Like that'd be so brutal. Just listening to you talk about it in your struggles. So I'm glad to hear that that's happening, my man. Two years. What was it that finally tipped you over? That finally you said like, I've done it. I've defeated long COVID. Right? Like what was the mark for you? Another great article. I said that today is going to be a great article day, and I think that's absolutely going to be the truth. I think we're gonna have a bunch of really nice articles. Before I read this one, though, let's all take a minute while we're celebrating with Eric. Top State Department official Victoria Nuland to retire in coming weeks. Farewell, psycho, you nightmare war criminal. Who like, if anybody should be going to the Hague, it's this lady, right? Like, Victoria Nuland is absolutely like the beating heart of the nonsense that happened in Ukraine. And her departure from the State Department is the primary signal and should be the thing that spreads out to everybody's brain and spreads out to everybody out in the world that the way the United States has been approaching the Ukrainian conflict is going to change significantly. Because I think you have to kind of be a dummy, so basically the majority of Americans, to believe that this conflict has gone well, right? The Ukrainian conflict has been a total fucking disaster for America on the world stage. Not in the way that the Iraq War and the war in the Middle East was a disaster. Because those wars and those conflicts still had people convinced that America was strong, powerful, and capable. The Ukrainian war showed the entire world very plainly America is weak, stupid, incompetent, and incapable. They don't know what they're doing. They don't have strategies. They don't have plans. They don't have thoughts. And they can't successfully achieve goals because they don't have any goals outside of let's blow it up and see what happens. Right? Well, Ukraine could be blue. It's just Ukraine isn't blue, and it should be blue, and that's the whole plan. If you're living in China, India, South America, Africa, Russia, i.e., the vast majority of the planet today, the vast majority of the planet today, you're looking at Ukraine and you're looking over at America and you're going, yeah, we're not going to do business with you anymore. You're too stupid to talk to. I would rather do business with someone else. Sven Kier on Twitch. Did you see today the clip of French tanks rolling into Ukraine? Yeah, Macron has been really pounding the pulpit on that kind of thing. Those tanks aren't going to do fucking anything, right? I would love to hear your views on why they put a fence up for Biden's speech. I think since January 6th, the power structure has been legitimately concerned, and there has been like lots of like one of the things that I constantly say on this stream is that people need to surround the halls of power and they need to actually get in these people's faces. And guess what? People are doing it, right? People are doing it. You know why they're doing it? Because the system is dead and has obviously turned into a system of extraction and abandonment. That's very clearly what's gone on. And of course, they're not going to put that on TV. So if all you do is watch TV and watch Fox News and watch CNN, right? Nobody's actually going to talk about it this way. And if they graze up against this idea of like, maybe extracting trillions of dollars of wealth and then just abandoning people is a bad strategy, right? Those people actually get straight up removed off of CNN and Fox and all this kind of stuff. So it's been rendered invisible. But if you look at the White House, right, people go to the White House and they surround the White House. You can see videos of people like pounding on these fences and tearing them apart and doing all kinds of stuff. So yeah, the moment in which all of these people gather at the White House in order to listen to a demented old man lie to them about some nonsense, yeah, they're going to put fencing up, right? Because they're worried about another January 6th event, which is just going to keep happening, by the way. Like that shit's like, wait for that shit to get endemic. Wait for that shit to become completely normal. Where like you're gonna have videos of like local police enforcement working with like how much longer is this game gonna go before people within the United States military, before low-ranking officials, before people turn and go, this is demented. We have to take control of this. Like how much longer until this like rabulous let's storm the Capitol and show them who's boss kind of stuff is literally led by like lieutenant generals and like and like lieutenants and stuff. Like how much longer until that shit starts to happen in a big and serious way? Because it's coming, baby. Like it's coming. Take a look at the history of all humanity throughout all time. That's how this shit goes down. There's not one single society in which everything always is just like, oh, we'll just keep doing elections and these completely fraudulent, illegitimate elections that are dominated by rich people exclusively that exclude 90% of the populace while we ignore a fentanyl crisis, ignore a housing crisis, ignore a collapsing economy, ignore crisis after crisis, while we poison the food, the water, the air, while we extract as much wealth from these people, while throwing them into tent cities and spending the only money that we actually spend on public sources is to literally build cities full of police officers. Yeah, this is going to result in a coup, right? Like it's going to result in a coup. And it's just a matter of time until it's an internal military coup. And to think anything else, I think, is just to like admit that you don't know anything about human history. Just literally, when I went to class and I read and I was listening to the teacher talk about ancient Roman history or Indian history or Chinese, not that we listen to Indian or Chinese history, but European history, that I just was asleep and I just wrote down the dates that they told me to write down and then forgot it all. Like human history is just laden with military coups, and America's got one coming. For sure. For fucking sure. So yeah, they're going to put up fencing. Right? They're going to put up fencing. like there's absolutely nothing keeping America together anymore. Just 0%. And you're starting to see people across America wake up to it. Like before I get into this Ukrainian stuff, there is a good story. Yeah, the Kellogg's boycott, right? Like, if you guys don't know, right? Like very straightforwardly, CEO of WK Kellogg Company Gary Pilnick joined CNBC for a segment of Squawk on the Street in late February. There he spoke about the rising costs of food. He also revealed Kellogg's plan to lower the price of cereal to make it more affordable option for dinner. Yeah. Don't eat chicken. Get out of here, chicken. Says the commercial they released about this. We're having cereal for dinner. The real big, like, let them eat cake vibes for sure. However, what? Consumers took offense to his remarks and intentions after realizing Kellogg's is likely going to inflate prices after people get hooked on cereal for dinner. People are now boycotting the Kellogg's brand and refusing to buy their products despite items being marked down in cost for now. Yeah. So it's like these people are obvious psychopaths who are like detached and demented on like a level that you got to literally go to like 14th century France, you know, you got to literally go to these places to see an equivalent. The COVID woke people up, I think. No, I think the hunger did, right? Like if we had walked through COVID and everything had just kind of gone back even to what was going on before COVID, but like that's not what happened. That after COVID they just started to extract value even more. Housing went out of its mind. Everything started to jack up its price, and it's just because rich people want more money. Like there's no secret to this. And the rich and the wealthy are just extracting wealth and then going to turn around and like go buy a Jeffrey Epstein pedophile island or build a bunker in Maui like Zuckerberg is doing. And they're just going to fucking abandon us, right? That's their plan. That's their strategy. That's obviously what they're doing. You've got to really be a dullard at this point to think something else is going on. And we're just watching them do it, right? We're just watching them do it. Like, as we head into this collapsed economy and as we head into this collapsed like feudal system, it's just going to be about building mutual aid with one another. That's it. It's going to be about looking at your neighbors and saying like, hey, and like growing your own garden, right? At this point, I actually do think that the most revolutionary act that a person could do is garden. Because if you get disconnected from the poisoned food distribution chain and you actually start growing food and you start distributing food into your own society and you start actually seizing control of the food distribution again so that they can't withhold food from you, right? That's very powerful. It's a very, very powerful thing. At this stage in the game, the only thing that we should be talking about is food and shelter. How do we provide food? How do we provide shelter? Because that's the true power of the death cult. That's how the death cult ensures that we have to pay fealty to it. Because we have to pay rent and we have to buy food. I feel like for most of us, if we weren't stuck in that obviously fraudulent arrangement that they call voluntary because they're psychopaths, we wouldn't abide by any of this. We literally wouldn't give these people a moment's thought, let alone our time or money, right? Counterpunch. To save Israel, the U.S. is destroying the international system it once constructed. In a conversation in 2020 with Princeton professor why am I struggling with that? Emeritus. It doesn't matter. Richard Falk. He told me that historically colonized nations that have won the legitimacy war have always won their freedom. Generation Y Me, thank you so much for the donation. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, bud. I don't like rich people, to be honest. Well, here's a big thing. This is something I should make a video about. I keep saying I should make a video, but like this, I absolutely should make a video about this. Every single time the issue is studied, and what we study what wealth does to a person, we discover that rich people have the equivalent of brain damage. We find out that they lose the ability to have empathy. We find out that they lose the ability to make rational thought. That they lose connection to what's going on around them in a serious way on the same level as somebody who has brain damage. Like, we should not allow this to happen, right? Like, we shouldn't allow ourselves to be inflicted on a very, like, if I were to be, like, not demonizing the rich, like, why would I ever want to support a system that gives people brain damage, especially a type of brain damage that makes them turn around and inflict others with brain damage. Like, it's some straight up like zombie shit. We're just letting it happen. Like, no, like full stop, no. All right. In a conversation, good to see you, Timothy. In a conversation in 2020 with Princeton professor emeritus Richard Falk, he told me that historically, colonized nations that have won the legitimacy war have always won their freedom. Palestine is unlikely to be the exception. The Gaza war, I mean, to call this a war, like, I'm sorry. I know that Counterpunch is, like, a good source, and I like Counterpunch and all this, but, like, every time I encounter this, I have to stop and talk about it. To talk about what is happening in Gaza as if it is a war, it's not a war. It's very straightforwardly a genocide, right? There's no such thing as a war where one side can shut off the other side's water. There's no such thing as a war where one side can shut off another side's electricity. There's no such thing as a war where one side has bombs and tanks and drones and literal AI targeting systems and robot dogs, and the other side is just people hiding in tunnels. Like, it's just not a fucking war. And to call it a war is just to continuously buy into the Nazi-level Goebbels propaganda that this is a both sides issue. That people like fucking Jon Stewart still spread around into your brain. Like, operate without brain damage. The Gaza war, however, is confronting the world with an unprecedented challenge, specifically to government's relationship with international law, their obligations to international institutions, such as the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, and the International Criminal Court, and others. The government is not legitimate unless it is carried on with the consent of the governed, English philosopher John Locke said in the 17th century. This is not a mere theory, and it will always be applicable. Consent, however, does not always reflect itself in the form of transparent and democratic elections. Legitimacy and loyalty to governments can be expressed in other ways as well. Those who do not respect this maxim could easily find themselves embroiled in political upheavals and violent rebellions, resulting from popular dissent. To maintain a degree of international consensus, the United Nations was founded in 1945. It was obvious from the very start the UN did not truly reflect the universal desires of all people. To the contrary, it was structured based on a hierarchical power paradigm, where the victors of World War II emerged as the masters, assigning themselves veto rights and permanent membership at the UN Security Council. As for the serfs, they were assigned with far less consequential seats in the General Assembly. The UN provided the absolute minimum platform of international legitimacy, but its unequal structure spurred yet another conflict, expressed in the words of British scholar Adam Groves, who described the privileged status of the Permanent Five in the UNSC not only as a Western-centric relic of the past, but worse, a means for the status quo powers to limit the influence and development of other states. To survive the inequality of the new international system, smaller countries work together to create alternative, albeit smaller, political bodies within the larger institutions. They use their large numbers to overcome the concentrated power in the hands of the few. They exploited every margin to represent the rights of the world's poorest and the oppressed nations. The non-aligned movement, founded in 1961, was one of several examples that served as, though in relative terms, a success story. Throughout the years, the United States and its Western allies molded their own version of legitimacy, in the way they interpreted international law, in the way they vetoed UN resolutions whenever it did not serve their interests, and in the way they isolated defiant members. During the Soviet era, the UN and its relevant institutions seemed nominally balanced, as the world was, indeed, divided between East and West, which gave NAM and other mostly global South-based organizations and alliances greater political value. Back then, China's economic power did not allow it to impose its version of legitimacy on the rest of the world. Things have changed. The Soviet front crashed in the early 1990s, breaking down a power paradigm that allowed Moscow to maintain a balancing act. On the other hand, China rose in power, slowly acquiring greater influence, thus legitimacy from countries that grew reliant on the Chinese economic engine. Another shift is underway. When one listens to the impassioned speeches of Russian, Chinese, Brazilian, South African, Irish, Egyptian, Saudi, and UAE representatives, one can see that international consensus is strongly coalescing around the legitimacy of international and humanitarian laws, not only regarding the ongoing war on Gaza, but in other matters of international peace and justice. Yet, when UN Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield raised her hand for the fourth time on February 20th, casting yet another veto, thus rejecting the Algerian call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, another pillar of international legitimacy broke down. Even at the ICJ, when the whole world made a case for Palestinian freedom, the United States opposed. The court should not find that Israel is legally obligated to immediately and unconditionally withdraw from occupied territory. The acting legal advisor for the United States State Department, Richard Visick, said on February 21st. Ironically, the United States has resorted to these various institutions, including the ICC, of which the U.S. is not even a member, to rationalize its actions in Iraq, in Serbia, in Libya, in Ukraine, and many other areas of conflict. There will be consequences to all of this, and the coming years shall prove that the crisis in international legitimacy resulting from the abuse of power will hardly be rectified with superficial changes and reforms. The problem is now much more profound and destructive, and the price is simply too high to bear. Military might alone is hardly enough for any country to acquire and sustain its legitimacy. Neither does economic influence or clever diplomacy. For legitimacy to be maintained, it requires much more than this, starting with the very premise that the spirit of international law was not meant to prolong war, but to end it. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, one side kills like 10,000 children in 100 days. Yeah, I mean, like, it's not a war. Like, to pretend like it's a war. Like, this is how this breakdown is going to look, right? The United States is going to lose legitimacy in the world. It's going to lose the capacity to spread its influence meaningfully in the world. It's essentially already a terrorist organization, right? The largest terrorist organization in the world. It achieves no goals. It accomplishes nothing. All it does is murder people. Perhaps they steal some resources every so often for themselves or whatever, but it's mainly just a money laundering scheme to extract wealth from you and put it into the hands of Raytheon. And of course, they drop some bombs on somebody in order to say, like, yeah, we did something, right? But the entire rest of the world is sick of it. They're not going to participate in it any longer. That they're taking their wealth and their time and their effort and their energy, and they're actually building things. China currently today has the largest solar panel power plant on Earth and has plans to expand that. They have an enormous trade system with the Belt and Road Initiative. Thousands and thousands of kilometers of high-speed rail. They're constantly building infrastructure for themselves. They're constantly building things. For God's sakes, I read an article recently that said that Russia and China have plans to build nuclear power plants on the moon. I don't know why they're doing that, but that's what they're saying, right? Yeah, Kevin writes, calling it a war would be like calling Nazi concentration camp guards shooting prisoners a war. Yeah, the prisoners threw a stick at the people shooting at them. Yeah, and and as this power retracts, right, historically what happens is that how the empire treats people abroad is how it treats its people at home. So you're going to have psychopaths like Dan Crenshaw come into power with his creepy James Bond villain eye patch, and he's going to take power, and he's going to act exactly like he did when he was overseas, which is as a psychopath. And you can't actually build a unified country in this way. And so the breakdown is going to happen, and it's going to happen very swiftly. I think people really misunderstand the speed by which this is going to happen. That the legitimacy of the United States empire and the legitimacy of the United States of America as a governmental body that has value is going to break down very, 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 very fast. You can see cracks in the fissures already as Greg Abbott stands up against the federal government regarding border disputes, while they lobby and fight back and forth with one another. And it is only a matter of time until America itself says, what value do we have staying together as a United States if no value is going to be wrought for the citizens? If the only thing that the government is useful for is to facilitate the project of wealth extraction and abandonment, which is exactly what they're doing. Eric writes, I do know that China is aiming to have 50% of the electrical grid to be not on fossil fuels by 2025. And the part I find funny is conservatives keep saying it won't happen because they keep opening new plants. But then again, they don't understand the Chinese economy at all. Yeah. No, I mean, like, it's time to stop listening to these people, right? Like, they don't actually know anything. It really is like listening to a guy who is riding a horse talking about how to get to the moon. Right? Like, it's not even the next generation at this point. It's not even like talking about a guy on a horse about cars and him going like, oh, the car will never catch on, ha ha ha, yabba yabba yabba. Like, no, we're talking about firing rockets at the moon and the guy on the horse being like, well, you'll need at least 1,000 horses in order to blah, 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 blah. And that's what he sounds like. That's what America sounds like right now. That the entire rest of the world is not going to be constrained by this kind of thinking, by this dim-witted religious fundamentalist worldview that says that we have to actually accommodate a small handful of total narcissistic Nazis. Like, it's get over it. Just take their wealth away, take their power away, strip their assets, actually use them for something. But they're not going to do that, obviously. They might say that they plan to do that, but they're not going to do that, right? Like, Trudeau eyes boost to housing and new budget as firms worry about tax hikes, right? None of these tax hikes are coming, right? It's not going to actually happen that way. They might say that it happens. And yeah, maybe there'll be like a 1% increase over 5 years or whatever. But like, nothing serious. Nothing serious at all. This is a great one that I saw from Mark Sloboda. Losing to Russia is shattering Western leaders' belief in their exceptionalism. Right? They're having a crisis of faith because it's always been a religious ideology. There is sincere panic among Western leaders who are forced to face the inevitable fact that they are losing to Russia. Mark Sloboda, a foreign relations and security analyst, told Sputnik's Fault Lines. It is shattering both their preconceptions of this conflict and also shattering their belief in their own exceptionalism and seniority, he said. We've heard from every Western leader. A Russian victory in Ukraine would be a defeat of NATO. They did this to themselves. They invested this much political and geopolitical capital. They've said the U.S. global leadership is at stake in the outcome of this conflict. The world might not have originally reached the same conclusion, but now they've forced them to because they said it so authoritatively. They are fighting for U.S. hegemony over the world. From their point of view, this was also an inevitability. From the view of the people who run the United States, the blob, the deep state, this war was absolutely essential. He noted that while they failed to defeat Russia, they did manage to deindustrialize Europe and make it more dependent on the United States. Like, we are truly in this, like, complete era of total dipshittery, right? Like this is an era of utter and total dipshittery. There was no reason to fight this war. Like this is the part about the situation. Like, there is an argument, in my view, to be made about why they do what they do in the Middle East. That the argument is, from the perspective of the psychopath, if we continuously create turmoil in the Middle East, if we continually stir this cauldron and ensure that it can never organize itself, and we create constant chaos in this region, then it can never form up and become an empire again, right? It can never form up and become the Ottoman Empire again. It can never be an Islamic empire again. It will always be broken apart. And especially if we can keep Iran and Saudi Arabia at odds with one another. Keep these two power blocks constantly in a face-off and create turmoil elsewhere. Keep everything divided. Then China can't develop it. Russia can't develop it. This can't become a bloc. Right? And it can never, ever become a threat to European domination, right? There's a logical argument that a psychopath would make, right? That makes a certain type of sense if you're a psychopath. Ukraine? What was the argument even? Like, what was even the argument? That you had Russia over here. Russia, who was literally following a line of Western appeasement, comes out of World War II, walks into the Cold War, and is giving literally every indication that it possibly can that it is entering a period of capitalist appeasement. Literally goes through a period of capitalist restoration in the 90s. Attempting to integrate itself into Western markets and into Western systems, doing everything it possibly can to say, like, haha, yeah, that communist period, yeah, we're not going to do that anymore. Please don't invade us. Everything that Europe and the United States wanted to see happen in Russia happened. The Soviet Union was abandoned as a project. That they moved away from an antagonistic posture against Europe. They moved away against an arms struggle. At one point, the United States and Russia were simultaneously disarming their nuclear stockpiles together. That was happening under fucking Ronald Reagan. And so in the face of that, what was the point of going into Ukraine? What was the point of funding a coup in 2014? What was the point of arming Nazis? What was the point of bombing the Donbass region? What was the point of any of it? Why did they do it? Because the result has been nothing short of a total disaster, even from the perspective of a narcissistic psychopath. Even if you were sitting there being like, well, we could trade Ukrainian lives to fight. Why are you fighting them at all, you dimwit? They're participating. They're bending the knee, you dumb fucks. They're bending the knee. Well, the only argument that I can see that makes any sense whatsoever is that the United States needs to make sure that Europe doesn't become part of Russia, that these two never join forces with one another. Keep these countries under our wing. What, you don't think that you could achieve that and also have Russia along with you? That's how weak you think the United States actually is. That's how pathetic you think this country actually is. Well, if the leadership of the United States thinks the United States is a pathetic, weak, useless country that can't be followed, then why does its citizens? It's just a total fucking joke. Tez writes, Russia is already empowering Iran in many facets, trading drone. Yeah, I mean, this is the ultimate result of what's gone on in Ukraine, is that it has forced Russia to find alternative allies, right? What is so embarrassing about this Ukrainian struggle, and what is so embarrassing about this Ukrainian conflict, is that Russia wanted to work with Europe and the United States. Russia wanted to be part of NATO. Russia wanted it literally was not working with China. It was not integrating itself into China. It was looking towards the West to become a Western ally. And if the United States and Europe had have been at all intelligent, it would have understood this, and it would have allowed Russia into NATO to create a large northern bloc. But instead, they chased Russia into the hands of America's enemies, chased Russia into the hands of the Chinese, chased Russia into the hands of the Iranians, chased Russia into the hands of the Syrians. And now Russia, along with China, stand against the United States, with Russia being extremely willing to fight proxy wars against the United States. And ultimately, because of this total failure in Ukraine and this total collapse of the United States in Ukraine, it means that Russia is going to become emboldened in this regard. That whenever the United States moves in somewhere to do a military action, Russia is going to go, yeah, we can win that fight. We're not going to be worried about it. How do we know that we can win that fight? Because we won this fight. And this fight we had to fight with our own people. This fight we had to fund directly. It was on our border. And we won. And the United States now is going to walk in to Chad or Sudan or Niger or Nigeria and be successful? Nuh-uh. Not a goddamn chance. And the Africans know it. The Africans, literally last year, most of the African nations created a series of military alliances with Russia. So that if America comes in and starts messing around with them, Russia's just going to activate its treaty and start sending resources to them. And it's going to do so while saying, yeah, we're going to do that and we're going to win. And how do we know we're going to win? Because we won here, goddammit. That what the United States has done is they took a sleeping bear who was just licking his paws and being like a good little Winnie the Pooh, and they gave that bear every reason to arm the fuck up and militarize its economy, and gave it all of the incentive it possibly could to be a legitimate threat to the hegemony of the United States, and it's winning. Why? How stupid are these people? How stupid is Victoria Nuland? How dim-witted, detached, narcissistic, arrogant, and moronic are these people? And the answer is extremely, because they're religious fanatics. They're religious fundamentalists who literally thought they were going to win this conflict because they're Americans. Boom, boom, boom. Sahel. What the heck is Sahel? I don't know everything that's happening in the world. Although I wish I did. Sahel. What are you? Sahel. Why is it doing this to me? Oh, is this Burkina Faso? Is this what we're talking about? Oh, it's like a larger region. I gotcha. Oh yeah, dude. What keeps popping up in my timeline is Burkina Faso, right? Like Burkina Faso right now is it experienced a military coup on the same kind of level as Thomas Sankara. I forget the name of the leader offhand, but whenever the guy stands up and talks, he sounds like Thomas Sankara. It's just like, and he looks like Thomas Sankara. He's got the same fucking hat style, the same military wear, the same garb, and he says the same things, right? Yep. This and there is a desire. There's a desire amongst these nations to decolonize themselves, right? To free themselves from France, for example. I know that Gabon very recently had a coup. Uh, 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 and there's a desire in Africa to be free from the system of colonialism, and it's finally coming to the fore that they're going to be able to achieve it. And the reason why they're going to be able to achieve it is that they aren't going to throw off the yoke of colonialism and then try to make a go of it by themselves. They've got a partner, and that partner isn't looking at them saying, work with us or we'll bomb you. Work with us at the end of a barrel of a gun. Looks like this partner is going, hey, we could just make a deal here. Like, we could just have a deal, right? Like, we don't need to extract this wealth and abandon your citizens. We could actually help the people of these countries. And of course, there's concern in Africa, obviously. I've heard from Africans and African leadership on the continent that they're concerned that they're just going to exchange one colonizer for another. But from what I can see, I think it's better to have a trade deal with an amicable trading partner than it is to have to bend the knee to a force that's going to invade you at every moment. And so the abandonment of the colonial era, and all of this, by the way, like, if the African colonies stop sending resources to France, for example, what's France going to do? France doesn't have an industry. France doesn't have anything. They make their wealth by extracting their wealth. This is why capitalists say, oh, we've never been richer. What are you complaining about? Yeah, because we're extracting wealth. It's a colonial project. Of course we're rich. We're extracting it from slaves. But if that colonial project ends, what's France gonna do? Fucking nothing. Like, fucking nothing. And all of these deindustrialized nations, this includes the United States, by the way, because the United States also does fucking nothing. They don't make anything. They don't manufacture anything. They don't export anything. They don't ship anything. And the rest of the world is just going to be like, yeah, what do you do? Why should we trade with you? Like, we'll trade for what? What are you doing? And the answer is just going to be like, well, we have French fashion models. Like, who cares? I can't imagine giving a shit. Oh, yeah, no, of course France isn't the worst off. The United Kingdom is just straight up a fascist country right now. Like, they're so desperate that they're starting to elect, like, George Galloway. Like, you're desperate. Like you guys, if it ever occurred in our country that the country of Canada started to elect me into positions of power, that's how you know that people have gotten desperate. Right? Like, that's how you know. The desperation is palatable because they're starting to vote for me. Content writes, guys, that's Kentucky, right? Kentucky passed a bill allowing pregnant folks to collect child support for fetuses. Now, hold on. So you have to be pregnant. So you're collecting child support while you're pregnant. I ostensibly agree with that. Some of the laws that are being passed in here, in the southern states, are so charmingly dim-witted, like saying that fetuses have rights, saying that fetuses have like. So if I have a fridge full of fetuses, can I use them as a tax dump, right? But John says, Eric, capitalism is not a zero-sum game. Learn some basic economics. Making the rich richer allows everyone to get richer. Yeah, like, imagine believing that you can just keep drawing the line up and that's just going to completely work. Like, it's just like the whole pitch of economics as a field of study is that how do you distribute scarce resources? Like, that's the whole pitch. And if that's not a zero-sum game, then I just don't think people understand what the term means. Yeah, Rishi Sunak did a speech calling George Galloway's a destruction of democracy from the guy who was appointed as PM, not elected, and a Goldman Sachs executive at that, right? Like, these people have gotten so fucking pathetic. Like, these people have gotten so fucking pathetic that like, this is why I don't buy in at all to this, like, the election of Donald Trump will be the end of democracy in America. Like, democracy is ending itself just fine in the United States without Donald Trump. Like, we don't need Donald Trump to end democracy in the United States, right? It's doing just fine on its own. And to try to run on that as a platform while your country is in the decay that it is in is childish. Stand up and start actually talking about the issues that are going on in your country and start saying that you're going to try to solve them. Right? Like at least pretend. At least do the thing that liberals are supposed to do, which is lie to everybody and then pretend like you're caring and then put a 0.2% increase on something over 20 years, right? At least do that. Stop with this, like, oh, Donald Trump is the worst thing that's ever gonna happen to America. Oh, by the way, we're sending all your tax dollars over to cause a genocide in Gaza. Here's my favorite, man. This is my absolute, like, here, do I have it? Yeah. Like, this moment, I feel like I should have, like, a song that plays whenever I see this kind of stuff. Like, hey there, they think you're dumb. They think you're really dumb. Ba-dum-bum, they think you're stupid. You'll buy anything. Here's another moment that says they think you're really dumb. They think you're dumb. Boink. They think you're dumb. Right? Biden to announce the United States will build port on Gaza shore for large-scale aid delivery. That's what they're building that port for. What they're going to do, for sure, guys. Hey, listen, everybody, shh. Listen, this is a serious thing that they're actually going to do. Everybody, after they've been carpet bombing Gaza for 100 days and causing a genocide and creating a total catastrophe, what their plan 100%, for sure, it's 100% the truth, is that they're going to build a port, right, on the Blue Beach Resort. We're gonna go down to the Blue Bridge Resort, and we're gonna put a pier there. We're gonna put a port there. It's gonna be a beautiful port, best port you've ever seen. You've never seen a port more beautiful than this. And what it's gonna be for is we're gonna send in all the aid. We're gonna send in all the aid, the best aid you've ever seen, beautiful aid. It's gonna be all the healthiest food, all the greatest products. Right? We're send all the things to help the Gazans, the poor Gazans. Poor Gazans, we felt so bad about the Gazans, all the poor Gazans, everybody, we felt so bad about it. Yeah. Right, so they're gonna build a pier there, right? They're gonna put a port here, right? And what the port will be for is to funnel military troops into Gaza to continue the ethnic cleansing, completely 100%, but also to aid in the building of the Ben Gurion Canal, right? Reminding everybody that the plan for Israel is to expand and become Greater Israel and to build a secondary canal to compete with the Suez Canal, with the intention likely to eventually destroy the Suez Canal. Like, and unless you're a very dumb person, it's pretty clear like that's what they're doing. And they're just announcing it in front of your face. Oh yeah, we're definitely going to put a port there to give them, well, this sheet says food, but that doesn't seem right. Right? That doesn't seem right at all. Yeah, Gaza is so small. Well, I mean, like, the thing about Gaza is one of the most densely populated areas on the planet. That they essentially took, like, you see the West Bank here, the line here. So the entire population of Palestine that existed outside of the West Bank, they basically shoved them into the Gaza Strip. And then they say, well, we gave them the Gaza Strip. What are they complaining about? Because they're fucking Nazis, right? And and they've just basically they built a wall around it. It's the largest open air prison on Earth. It's not close, and now they're just straight up doing a yeah. They will starve to death before any port will be built. Depends on the port they build. No, I mean, like, the whole point of putting a port here is to make sure that they can get construction equipment, gear, military gear if they need it. But, like, they're going to build that canal, goddammit. Like, that's what they're doing, and that's what they're going to use your tax dollars for. Because the goal now is to ensure that Israel is going to become where the wealthy escape to. Right? Like, when I say things like they're going to flee to their bunkers, they're going to leave to their Jeffrey Epstein pedophile island, they're going to go to little enclaves and places where they can flee and escape to get to make sure that they can abandon the catastrophe they created in America. Well, Israel's one of them. Right? Israel's one of them. And they're going to expand this, and this is going to become the place where all the wealth is put. Because they don't give a fuck about America. Like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, none of these guys give a fuck about America. They don't care at all. It's a project of extraction and abandonment. Well, where are they actually funneling the money? And they're going to widen this, right? Man, there might even be a point where they're just like, we'll just go and put the line here. We'll take over the Suez Canal. What are they going to do? What's Egypt going to do? They're going to stop us? Like, we are looking at an enormous terrorist organization, which is called the United States military. The CIA, the FBI, these enormous terrorist organizations enact a project of terror on the rest of the world. And these institutions, for as long as they persist and as long as they live, will continue to enact these policies of terror. Like, they enacted a war on terrorism and they sided with terrorism. Like, it's very, very straightforward. I also love how Biden, to show solidarity with Palestine, he sent relief aid by air as if it will help anything. Well, and you know what that relief aid was, right? I've read an article on this that the relief aid that they sent was expired ration packages from the United States military. Right, I've seen one of my favorite ones that I saw. I called it, by the way. I called it was right here. So they're sending these little packages. You see these little things? Beautiful little things, right? Little tabs on them, all that kind of stuff. Well, what these are, right? This is what members of my family found today in our completely destroyed neighborhood in Al Absan Al Kabira, east of Khan Yunis. It closely looks like canned meat, but in reality, it's an explosive bomb left behind the Israeli terrorist army before their defeated withdrawal from the neighborhood, exploiting starvation, hunger, and people's need for food. When the key is turned at the top of the can to open it, it explodes and kills everybody around it. So they're putting aid and food packages everywhere, just laced with explosives. Right? Which, incidentally, I called. I outright said that that's what they were going to do. Because we live in a psychopath country that's ruled by psychopaths. So I'm going to pivot away from Israel and get back into Ukraine. Because this article... So stick around for a second. I'm just going to go use the washroom. So there's going to be a moment of dead space. But the reason why you want to stick around to hear this article is this is the article where the United States is distancing itself from Zelensky and Ukraine. That what's happening in Ukraine is no longer a Western problem, it's a Zelensky problem. So stick around and we'll go through it. From the Washington Post, Jeff Bezos's arm of the media system, because these guys don't work with the United States State Department to enact policy goals on behalf of the capitalist death cult. Zelensky in bind over how to draft more troops as Russian forces advance. Kiev. Even as he promises international partners that Ukraine will handle the fighting if given needed weapons and other support, President Vladimir Zelensky and his top military commanders have failed so far to come up with a clear plan to conscript or recruit many thousands of new soldiers critically needed to defend against Russia's continuing attacks. Zelensky's inability to forge a political consensus on a mobilization strategy, despite months of warnings about a severe shortage of qualified troops on the front, has fueled deep divisions in Ukraine's parliament, and more broadly in Ukrainian society. It has left the military relying on a hodgepodge of recruiting efforts and sown panic among fighting-age men, some of whom have gone into hiding, worried that they will be drafted into an ill-equipped army and sent to certain death, given that aid for Ukraine remains stalled in Washington. The quandary over how to fill the ranks has confronted Zelensky with perhaps the greatest challenge to his leadership since the start of the February 2022 invasion. The lack of a clear mobilization strategy or even agreement on how many more troops Ukraine needs factored into Zelensky's dismissal of his top general in February. But the new commander-in-chief, Alexander Syrskyi, so far has brought no new clarity. Syrskyi has been tasked with auditing the existing armed forces to find more combat-eligible troops, after Zelensky's office recently announced that of the 1 million people who have been mobilized, only about 300,000 have fought at the front lines. But nearly a month after his promotion, no one in the military leadership or the presidential administration has explained where those 700,000 are, or what they have been doing. Probably because they didn't exist in the first place. Ukrainian lawmakers say the lack of a unified message from the president and the military has added confusion over the next steps. I don't know why Zelensky or his team will still try to convince society that everything is always fine, said Solomia Bobrovska, a lawmaker from Holos, a liberal opposition party. It's not, especially with the army. Ukraine's dwindling number of battle-ready troops is now a strategic crisis that was at least partially to blame for its recent retreat from the eastern city of Avdiivka and surrounding villages, where Ukrainian forces were far outnumbered. Oleksiy Bizsevets, an advisor to the Defense Ministry on recruitment, says civilians of fighting age must accept that there's no time for you left to sit home. It's quite possible Russians will move quite closer soon if there's nobody to stop them, Brevets said. If, in addition to the lack of ammunition, weapons, shells, and so on, we've got a lack of personnel, it's a tragedy, he added. But after 2 years of all-out war, the sense of public urgency that spurred new troops to the battlefield and fueled Ukraine's early successes has faded. Many soldiers are wounded and exhausted. For all this time, men between the ages of 18 and 60 have been banned from leaving the country, and men 27 and older have been eligible to be drafted, with some exceptions. Civilians between 18 and 27 can sign up on their own. Parliament has now spent months heatedly debating a bill that would change the mobilization process and widen the scope of the draft, in part by lowering the eligibility age to 25. More than 4,000 amendments have been made to the mobilization bill, and some lawmakers see the measure as an attempt by Zelensky to pass off responsibility to Parliament for inevitably unpopular decisions. It's time to start an adult conversation with society, and not to be afraid of it, Bobrovska said. It's not 2022, when emotions took over. Zelensky has long tried to control public messaging about the state of the war to preserve public morale. He publicly announced a death toll for Ukrainian troops for the first time last weekend, saying that 31,000 have been killed since February 2022, a number that could not be independently confirmed. Yeah, 31,000 have been killed. Yeah, okay, bud. Seems a tinge on the low side. Zelensky has also faced mounting pessimism at home and abroad about Ukraine's chances of holding off the Russian onslaught without more help from the United States. House Speaker Mike Johnson has refused to take up legislation that includes some $60 billion in aid for Ukraine. It's time for serious talks with society. Serious and honest talks, and to explain what we have to do without any artificial bravery, said Vladimir Arev, a lawmaker from the opposition European Solidarity Party. Bobrovska is backing proposed changes to the bill that would ensure the demobilization of troops who have already served lengthy stints in frontline positions. As it stands, she said, the only way to be back is injured or killed. Ariev voted against an earlier draft of the mobilization bill that he deemed too punitive. He opposes measures like suspending driver's licenses and seizing bank assets of citizens who do not register for the draft. In January, fearing such measures, account holders rushed to withdraw their money, taking out more than $700 million in a single month, the most withdrawn since February 2022. The priority, Arab said, should be to guarantee to people who will be mobilized for military service that they will not be sent to the front line without training and proper equipment. It's really scaring people and creates a lack of trust in the government. Those fears are driving some draft-eligible men to take evasive steps. One 31-year-old man whose parents are living under Russian occupation in eastern Ukraine said he's hiding in an apartment in Kiev, fearful that he will be drafted and sent to the front unprepared and ill-equipped. He spoke on the condition of anonymity because of concerns for his safety. In December, while visiting the central Ukrainian city of Vinnytsia, soldiers stopped him on the street and handed him a draft notice. He left without visiting the recruitment office there, hoping his case would disappear into a disorganized bureaucratic system. But a month later, police in Kiev stopped him for a random check. When they searched his name in their database, he saw the word "wanted" pop up in big red letters. Officials in Vinnytsia had registered his failure to appear. He was ordered to appear at a recruitment office the next morning, but had a panic attack and did not go. He has no military experience. You cannot imagine a person who is further from the army or military stuff, he said. It just doesn't really make any sense to hunt me for that. In November, the Defense Ministry partnered with Lobby X, a recruiting platform that posts job openings in the military, ranging from frontline roles to rear-end logistics or IT. People, first of all, want to control their future as much as possible and want to have clarity about what they will do in the army, said Vladislav Gretsiev, co-founder of Lobby X. While applications have soared for less risky posts, the challenge is to fill the combat positions, Gretsiev said. The 31-year-old in hiding said he's considered applying for a non-combat role, but fears that once enrolled he could be transferred to combat duty. For now, he plans to stay inside indefinitely until a lawyer can help resolve his case. It's still better than going there and dying in a week, which is my maximum, I think, he said. Yaroslav Yurchitshin, a member of parliament from the Holos Party, said, lawmakers are seeking an appropriate motivation mechanism to encourage enlistment, including bonuses for destroying Russian equipment and new financial benefits for veterans. It's a hard discussion because previously we mobilized people who have this feeling of duty, Yurchin said. Now we must motivate our people to serve in the army. Bretsiets, an advisor to the defense ministry, said the country has a future up to the moment where there are people who are ready to fight for it and to die for it. I don't like to die for it. It's better to kill for it, he added. But despite the existential threat to Ukraine, many civilians, he said, are just dust in the wind. Yeah, they just ran out of Nazis. That's all. They just ran out of Nazis. Like, oh, the Nazis. We don't have any more Nazis left. They all fled. Or died, hopefully. Yeah, Ukraine is winning, though. Yuck. Like, there was a person who spent about a week in here trying to convince me that America was going to win this war. And, like, I told you so. You know? Like, I just told you so. Like, and it's pretty basic. Like, here's Russia, right? That's Russia. We're all seeing it. That's Ukraine. Russia, Ukraine. Right? Russia, Ukraine. So this conflict, like this situation, the only question that's left is how much territory does Russia want? And what is Ukraine going to look like? That the Russians have made it very clear that they don't really want to take Kiev. They're not interested in going into Kiev. They're not interested in that kind of urban warfare. They're not interested in destroying Kiev. So how many more lives need to be lost? How much longer does this conflict need to go? And how much territory are the Russians going to take? Eric writes, I see lots of reports where the elite Ukrainian forces are continually being deployed in defense postures and their unit gets destroyed. It's also well reported that their units are nowhere near at capacity. Yeah. I mean, look. Eventually you just run out of people. How many times have I been saying this? How long have I been saying this? Over and from the beginning, I've been saying this, right? Like, the Ukrainians fought with all the manpower they had right at the beginning. The Russians pulled a mobilization and could pull another mobilization and have been mobilizing ever since. And could continue to, right? They have like 10 times the population. Maybe 10 times is a slight exaggeration, but not by much. Yeah, Russia is slowly moving forward a bit at a time. It's not in a race, right? It's not in a race. That, as far as Russia is concerned, like, in terms of the territory that it wants, its main military goals are completed, right? It doesn't need to push forward in a big, huge blitz and in a big rush. Like, they know that this is a war of attrition. And there's no sense even putting any Russian military personnel or any Russian people in a position where they could be killed, right? That their goal is to occupy this territory and own this territory. It's why somebody said earlier, oh, Macron sending tanks and all this. Well, look, all the equipment that they keep sending Ukraine is like the outdated bullshit that the West no longer uses. And they keep sending it over here with this like rah, let's go. Russia owns the sky. They control the sky in Ukraine. You could send 1,000 tanks across the border in Ukraine. They will be blown up. Why? Because you can see tanks from the sky and tanks cannot shoot up. It's all performative. It's all performative. And it's all been based on this bullshit religious ideology that America's going to win because America. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. What will Russia do about it? What will Russia do about what? I mean, Russia's going to win this thing. That's what Russia's going to do about it. Like, Russia's just going to win this thing. Like, here's the heartbreaker, okay? Like, here's what Russia will ultimately be willing to do. And nobody really wants to talk about it. But like this is what Russia will ultimately do if it has to. It will take this territory, right here, all the way around, and it'll go and it'll encircle Kiev. Right? And then it won't let anything into Kiev. It'll do it. It's not going to send any troops into Kiev. It's not going to do anything like that. It's just going to encircle it, and it'll just say, yep, we're done here, right? You don't have any farmland. You don't have any territory. You don't have any manufacturing. You don't have any goods. And if Kiev starts to set up some kind of munitions plant or some kind of manufacturing plant, they'll fucking bomb it. Because they have air superiority. And they'll just surround it. Considered a war crime, because it's what's known as siege warfare. But they'll do it. Like, from everything that I have observed about this war and the Ukrainian war, the ball has always been in the Ukrainians' court. This has always been up to the Ukrainians to finally say, okay, we're done now. Because what's so dumb about all of this? From the outset, what was Russia's objectives? Right? I think that they had three objectives, three stated objectives, only one of which I'm like, First objective, end the Donbass war. Now, you can go ahead and pretend if that the Donbass war wasn't a real thing if you want, but for those of us that like facts and evidence, since 2014, the Ukrainian Nazis were creating a war against ethnic Russians in the Donbass region. Well, the Russians are going to end that war. And they're going to end that war by taking that territory. Right? So, one. So how could the Ukrainians have prevented the Russians from taking that territory? They could have just not driven tanks over there and started shelling ethnic Russians in the first place. That would have been a great way to do it. Right? Super good way to make sure that Russia doesn't get involved in this territory at all is to just not fight that war. Because what are you fighting that war for? Oh, right, because you're fucking Nazis. Right, got it, check. This like racial purity death cult shit is just unbelievable. The second thing, hey, Ukraine, don't join NATO. Right? The most rational and reasonable thing possibly imaginable for Russia to actually say is, hey, can't help but notice that this military alliance that includes our former antagonist, the Nazis, keeps steadily moving towards us. No, thanks. Not going to tolerate that for any amount of time. So if you start doing that in Ukraine, we're going to go to war with you, which is what they told the former ambassador to Russia, William Burns, in 2009. And we know that because of a leaked memo thanks to WikiLeaks. William Burns, incidentally, is the current head of the CIA. Now, was the ambassador to Russia. And he straight out said, yeah, if you start doing this in Ukraine, they're going to go to war over it. Well, we did it anyway, because we're very dim-witted people. And the idea that Russia should just be okay with Ukraine becoming part of NATO, if you believe that, you're a moron. Like, no longer trustworthy intellectually. Just not an intelligent person. Full stop. Ukraine is the historical channel by which Europe invades Russia. That's how Napoleon invades Russia. That's how Hitler invades Russia. It is the corridor. And so for Ukraine to flip over and join forces with former Nazi state Germany, responsible for killing 25 million Russian citizens, yeah, it's not going to fly. So I'd say they've been successful on that line. So they're ending the Donbass war, number one. They're ensuring that Ukraine will not join NATO, and even if they have to wreck Ukraine to do that. The third thing, the denazification of Ukraine. Good luck, champ. Good luck with that one. I mean, a noble endeavor, right? Like the Azov Battalion and the neo-Nazis that the United States was funding, right, are fairly well entrenched political forces in Ukraine. But like, yeah, I don't think you're going to get rid of those guys. I think that if your hope is that Zelensky will vomit out Andrei Beletsky or something, that the leader of the Azov Battalion will suddenly go to trial or something, yeah, good luck with that. So at this point, I think that if Ukraine basically just stood up and sued for peace, the Russians would listen. And they would probably just hold the positions that they have, keep the territory that they've got. They would expect Ukraine to sign a treaty that said we will never join NATO. And what's so stupid about all of that is that they could have done that from the outset, right? And they were close to doing that. But then NATO and Boris Johnson flew in and convinced Zelensky not to go along with it. The sad story about it is that I feel like Zelensky has been governing with a Nazi rifle in his back the whole time. Like, when he first came into power, he was elected on the platform of ending the Donbass war. That was the platform that he was elected on. So the people of Ukraine saw that there was a war going on in the Donbass, right? And actually elected somebody who was saying, I plan to end that war. So good on the people of Ukraine for doing that. And in fact, give it to Zelensky himself for running on that platform. We even have reports of him going to the front line and saying to the Nazis there, okay, we're ending this. We're pulling back. And you know what those Nazis told him? We don't give a fuck what you think. We don't answer to you. We're funded by NATO. Go fuck yourself. And from that moment forward, as far as I'm concerned, Zelensky has essentially been just trying to find a way to A, survive this thing, and B, extract as much wealth for himself. Because I can't imagine a clearer a signal to the newly elected leader of the country that you don't actually have any power. Like, Zelensky has never had any power in any of this. Then telling the military to stop engaging in a war and being told to go fuck yourself. Yeah, I think that's right. Demand better. Because, like, I think it's just important to just tell the facts of what's going on. Because that's what it's about. It's not about maintaining a narrative. It's about knowing what's going on. And if somebody can provide evidence to show that a different thing has happened, then you go ahead with that. Right? Just Me writes, he isn't a good man. I'd agree with that. He was picked by the USA to be a leader, and he was told what to make his platform to get elected. CIA has bases in Ukraine for over a decade. So Just Me, you're presenting an idea that he just ran on that platform because he knew it was popular, and he was never sincere. He was never sincere. Which, I mean, that's an idea, right? And that he's always been just a stooge for Western capital. But, like, oh yeah, No, I mean, like, there's been all kinds of stuff going on in Ukraine. The bases, the biochem labs. That was a big one. Like that to me was like, that was the moment when I really realized, like, oh yeah, like there's no bottom anymore. It was when we had credible reports and credible evidence talking about the biochem labs in Ukraine. It's like, oh, like, why doesn't this get talked about more? Well, because it's like the most demonic evil shit that you've heard of in your life. Oh yeah, okay, cool. The Well, John's right. Well, yeah, thank you. Better demand better. The credit should go to Ukrainian voters for opposing the war to begin with, and I think that's really the true victims in all of this, right? Are the citizens of Ukraine, are the people of Ukraine, are the workers of Ukraine, as always, right? That they have gotten caught up in a conflict between capitalists, between capitalist powers. Yeah, Victoria Nuland was caught on tape picking the previous leader. Do you think they would allow someone else to get elected if they didn't already have control of him? But I think that by the time Zelensky comes on the stage, it doesn't matter who's elected, right? Like I don't think it mattered. Like I don't think it was about control of Zelensky or control of, like, I just don't think it mattered. They already had the war they wanted. They were already connected to the people who they wanted to be connected to. They were already moving that front line. They were already fighting in Donbass. So, like, I definitely take your point, and I think that it is a credible narrative, to be sure. But I at the end of the day, it's one of those issues or one of those situations that I'm like, I don't know how heavily it matters. Right? Like the funding of the Nazis and the war in the Donbass is what matters. That we can definitely agree that Zelensky has been nothing but a stooge in the middle of this. So really what we're discussing is just to what degree is Zelensky a stooge? Is he is he a well-meaning goofball who got caught up in large international politics? Or is he a straight up CIA asset who was put into the position he was put into to act as a controlled dissent, to pretend as though he was an anti-war candidate when he never was? So I don't know that we'll ever know the answer to that one. That's going to be like 40 years from now. There'll be unclassified documents, and some Ukraine scholar will publish a book that only someone like me will read and talk about and report on, right? It'll be like the Legacy of a Dark Legend book written about Stalin. You know, it'll be like very small groups of people will actually read that and try to discover more what's actually going on. Like, in the minds of the average normie Westerner, Zelensky will be regarded as a hero, right? Just like Navalny, right? We'll talk about Zelensky as, he put up a strong front and he fought the war and he did everything he had to do to fight against the storms of the orcish Russian forces. And nobody will ever acknowledge that, like, the West created this war for sure. Funded a coup, funded literal Nazis to enact a war in the Donbass, which is easy to read about. There's like straight up a Wikipedia page about it. Even the CIA is like, yeah, okay, the Donbass war. Like, it's gotten really, like, obvious, like most of this stuff, right? It's just gotten really obvious. So you have to really try. Which circles me back around to the thing that I was talking about right at the beginning. We have entered a period of deep stupidity. That this is a deeply stupid time to be part of Western civilization because stupidity is the last position. There's nowhere else to go. You just said they could the last anti-war pro-Russian president. They weren't going to let it happen again. Yeah, but again, I think it's just like, I just don't think it mattered. Like, you could elect a guy who's going to scream at the top of his lungs every single moment of every single day, end the war, end the war, end the war, and stomped on the feet. It just wasn't going to happen. Because the troops and the people who were actually doing the war didn't care what that person had to say. Right? Like I think fundamentally what I'm driving at is that the position of presidency no longer has power in Ukraine. It's not where the power is anymore. And that Zelensky or whoever was going to be in that position finds themselves in a position, whether allied or not. It did matter, a pro-Russian... No. Like, after the coup and after the war was ongoing, like, I just don't think, like, I think they got what they wanted, and I think that it wasn't going to matter who got elected. Like, I just don't think the position had any power anymore. Like maybe on a superficial level, in terms of optics and all of that kind of stuff. Like, if somebody had got elected that was, like, screaming for help for Putin and all that kind of stuff. But, like, I don't think that person would have survived. You know what I mean? Like, I think that person would have just been shot by the Nazis. So, like my position is that the people who were actually in political power at that time, and likely still are the Nazis. Like, that's the actual political force in Ukraine. And like, nobody is gonna, well-meaning or no, right? Like, they're not gonna listen to that guy. They're not gonna listen to somebody and say, like, okay, let's get off the front line, let's do this. They're just gonna say, oh, I don't give a fuck what you think, right? And you play ball with us, or we'll put a bullet in your back. Like, I think that's the prevailing force of what's actually been going on in Ukraine for this whole time, for certainly the last 2 years. That, like, if Zelensky had suddenly, like, been talking this pro-Putin game, he'd be dead. And they'd be open about why he was dead. He's a traitor. Yanukovych wasn't exactly pro-Russian either. He was playing both sides. Well, I mean, like, when it comes to politics, there's a healthy degree of opportunism that comes into it, right? Like, and I think that this minor disagreement we're having about whether, like, to what degree was Zelensky a bought-in CIA asset from the outset. What we can certainly agree on is that he's fundamentally just there to be a face of the war and to extract as much wealth for himself at this stage, right? Like, he doesn't exist as, like, he's not like a center of power at all. Like, nobody cares what he thinks in Ukrainian society. Nobody listens to him. He definitely is just there for Westerners to cart out in front of their own nations and clap at. Like, they did a really good picture of him for Time magazine, right? So he's just like the face to sell the war, as far as the Western propaganda machine is concerned. And then he just exists to extract, like, just to skim as much money off the top for himself. Like, I've seen the number as high as $400 million at this point. And so whether or not he was elected on good intentions or not, that's where he is. And to say again, I think it's credible to say that he was tied in with the CIA right away. Like, that's a credible statement to make. And so I think where I would land is I'd like to see something more definitive before I start making that claim myself. Yeah, that's where I'll land with that. That, like, I think it's a credible statement to make. I think it's believable, but I'd like to see that dot a little bit more connected before I myself start saying that CIA asset Zelensky. because I think there's a believable narrative. There's another believable narrative that doesn't require evidence to believe, which is that an anti-war candidate got into power and realized that he had no power, and so just started to do what was best for him and siphon as much wealth as he could in that sinking ship. Right? So, yeah, cool talk. And I won't be too surprised because you're right that there's been CIA bases and all of this talked about in Ukraine. And all it really would take is like an article showing that Zelensky was even just getting funding from those guys, right? And maybe it exists and I just don't know about it. Yeah, that's a fun talk, that one. Boy, that'd be great. In like 2 years, I'll be like, CIA asset. So the CIA funded Zelensky in order to run as a fake anti-war candidate. Yeah, that'll be great. Hey guys, this one's going to shock you. All right? This one's going to shock you. 50 years of tax cuts for the rich failed to trickle down. Economics study says. What? Hold the phone. Tax cuts for the wealthy have long drawn support from conservative lawmakers and economists who argue that such measures will trickle down and eventually boost jobs and incomes for everyone else. But a new study from the London School of Economics says 50 years of such tax cuts have only helped one group: the rich. We've got a beautiful comment here. First time chatter on Twitch. I can't feel a thing. I'm so glad I found your channel. I'm in my 50s and just now learned a lot about this war and such. Thanks, and you have a great way with words and make people understand situations. Well, that's a kind comment, friend. I very much appreciate that. I very much appreciate that. And you know what? While you can't feel a thing, your comment makes me feel something right here. Makes me feel something right here. So, you're like the Tin Man up in there, right? You're like the Tin Man. The new paper by David Hope of the London School of Economics and Julian Limburg of King's College London examines 18 developed countries, from Australia to the United States, over a 50-year period from 1965 to 2015. The study compared countries that passed tax cuts in a specific year, such as the United States in 1982, when President Ronald Reagan slashed taxes on the wealthy, with those that didn't, and then examined their economic outcomes. Per capita gross domestic product and unemployment rates were nearly identical after 5 years in countries that slashed taxes on the rich and those that didn't, the study found. But the analysis discovered one major change. The incomes of the rich grew much faster in countries where tax rates were lowered. Instead of trickling down to the middle class, tax cuts for the rich may not accomplish much more than help the rich keep more of their riches and exacerbate income inequality, the research indicates. Based on our research, we would argue that the economic rationale for keeping taxes on the rich low is weak. Julian Limburg, a co-author of the study, and a lecturer in public policy at King's College London, said in an email to CBS Money Watch, in fact, if we look back into history, the period with the highest taxes on the rich, the post-war period, was also a period with high economic growth and low unemployment. Because the analysis ends in 2015, the research does not include President Donald Trump's massive tax overhaul, which he signed into law in late 2017, and which slashed taxes for the rich and corporations while providing a moderate cut for the middle class. But Limburg, who co-authored the study with David Hope, a visiting fellow at the London School of Economics International Inequalities Institute, said that he wouldn't expect the result of that tax cut to be much different. Already, Mr. Trump's tax cuts have lifted the fortunes of the ultra-rich, according to the 2019 research from two prominent economists, Emmanuel Saez and Gabriel Zuckman of the University of California at Berkeley. For the first time in a century, the 400 richest American families paid lower taxes in 2018 than people in the middle class, the economists found. The careful new research from the London School of Economics suggests indeed that tax increases on the wealthy should be considered post-COVID, Berkeley Zuckman said in an email to CBS Money Watch. Engine for stronger economic growth? To be sure, the economy was humming along before the pandemic struck the nation in March, with an unemployment rate that was at its lowest in a half-century. Conservative think tanks such as the American Enterprise Institute pointed to Mr. Trump's tax cuts as an engine for stronger economic growth. Yet, even so, millions of American families struggled to find jobs that paid living wages, while the cost of essentials such as healthcare, housing, and education increased at far faster rates than the typical income. Even before the pandemic, income inequality had reached its highest point in 50 years, according to census data. In 2020, the pandemic has worsened inequalities across all spectrums, touching racial, gender, and educational divides. When the economy shut down in March, workers who couldn't transition to remote work, typically lower-paid employees involved in retail, service, and hospitality jobs, were hit the hardest. At the same time, white-collar workers generally fared better as they were more likely to maintain their jobs as they shifted to remote work. Investors also benefited as the stock market rallied on hopes for an economic recovery, a development that doesn't help the most low and middle-class workers. Only about half the U.S. population is invested in the stock market through their retirement and savings accounts, and even then more than 80% of all stocks are owned by the richest 10%. Since the pandemic began, the combined wealth of America's 651 billionaires has jumped by more than $1 trillion, reaching $4 trillion in early December, Americans for Tax Fairness said earlier this month. Meanwhile, almost 8 million Americans have fallen into poverty since the start of the pandemic through November, according to new data released by the University of Chicago and the University of Notre Dame. Rebuilding the economy and household wealth for low and middle-class families are among the issues facing President-elect Joe Biden after he's inaugurated next month. Raising taxes on the rich and corporations could provide trillions of dollars in resources for helping in the economic recovery, Zuckman told CBS Money Watch. This is not only a viable option, but also a fair option, because some of the wealthiest taxpayers have benefited from the pandemic. For instance, large corporations such as Amazon and their shareholders, he noted. These taxpayers could reasonably be asked to pay more to make up for pandemic losses. The end of these articles are always the most dipshit stuff I've ever heard, right? Yeah, what we'll do. Yeah, what we'll actually do. This is a serious comment that I'm about to make here. Yeah, you got to really recognize, right? Gat Najara, good to see you. You got to really, really, really recognize that it takes highly educated people to be this dumb, right? It's taken them 50 years to figure out what anybody who's working literally any job has known the entire fucking time. When I was a college student, 19 years old, I was like, yeah, this is a crime. Like, 1 + 1 = 2, right? Real obvious, straight in front of your face, right? It's taken these guys 50 years to figure out what, like, babies know. Like, yeah, if you take all the food away from everybody and pile it in a corner, then everybody else is going to starve. Right? So it takes like college professors and university professors to be this stupid. And their solutions are always the most charming, dim-witted shit you've ever heard in your life. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn to the politicians that are owned by these billionaires who extracted trillions of dollars, and we're going to ask them nicely to raise taxes on the rich, and they'll do it. Yeah, we're an unserious bunch of stupid morons who have literally been acting as a priesthood for a religious death cult for the last 50, 60 years. Right? But now, please, God, please take us seriously now that we're telling the truth about what's actually going on. Like, it's not, thanks, guys. Thanks now, CBS News and the London School of Economics. Like, thanks now for actually finally telling the truth. Thank you now for actually standing up and actually saying, oh, wow, reality exists. Oh, shit, we can't just exist in a religious space for our entire fucking lives, right? Oh, it turns out that there's consequences for our actions. So, like, I don't give much credit to these priests who call themselves economists for finally acknowledging that the earth is round. Like, thanks, guys. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for finally, like, standing up and being like, you know what? I think that pedophilia might be wrong. We've been raping boys for hundreds of years, but I think that might be wrong. Well, we should get a Nobel Peace Prize for this one. Like, nah. Like, thanks. Thanks for catching up. Thanks for figuring it out. You're the last ones in the room to do so. Like, day late, dollar short. The billionaire class is not just going to stand by passively and be like, raise our taxes. That's fine. Mark Zuckerberg is going to run into the basement of his bunker, right? Elon Musk is going to go to Musk Town. Jeff Bezos is going to go to a mountaintop, right? Some of these guys are going to escape to islands or like resorts or go to Qatar or the UAE or whatever. They're all going to blow away and abandon America completely, go to their little pedophile Jeff Epstein islands, right? Spend the last 20 years of their life in total debauchery, like hunting us for sport, basically, while you guys are like, yeah, maybe it was a bad idea to give all those guys that money, while the whole fucking society collapses right around your ears. Because none of these politicians are going to listen to what you have to say. They don't give a fuck, right? They listen to what the pedophiles have to say. They don't give a fuck what you think, right? Where were you guys 50 years ago? Where were you guys when the Chicago school was saying, yeah, the best way to build a society is to destroy it and burn it to the ground. That's the best way to do things. Like, fundamentally, that's what the argument always was. I know how to build a society that's efficient. What we'll do is destroy it. And that'll build it. But you couldn't figure this one out? You couldn't look at Friedman and the Chicago guys and be like, that sounds dumb. That sounds like a stupid thing that a stupid person would say. For the obvious reasons that destroying things destroys them. And building things builds them. Yeah, South Park episode for sure. Hi there. Good to see you. With a series of emojis. Well done. Well done. Good to see you. DM writes, corporatocracy, bureaucracy, and oligarchy makes the rules and rules the roost. The rest of us are just blind sheep headed towards the slaughter. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm blind, but definitely the slaughter part. Yet when you bring these issues to conservatives ideologues, they completely ignore such studies as No. Like, you're talking to a religious fanatic. Like, the second you're introducing, like, anybody who is even remotely pro-capitalist at this point is just straight up, like, they are not different than somebody that is actually saying, we must appease the volcano god Vishnakla by sacrificing the virgins to the volcano. And if we do not sacrifice the virgins to the volcano, then the volcano god Vishnakla will condemn us to having failed crops year after year. Sacrifice to Vishnakla. They're the same. Not different. Right? And you really, like, when I do these things and when I talk that way, I know, I can feel it in the universe. I can feel that energy in that same way that like an evangelical will be like, now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm getting a message from the on high. I'm getting a message from Jesus Christ up in the sky. I can hear it down in the heavens. Jesus Christ standing up there, and I can tell that there's a young lady out there by the name of Ethel. Now, Ethel has doubts about whether or not she wants to support the church today, but I'm telling you today, Ethel, is what you need to do. You need to reach in that pocket. You need to pull a dollar bill out of that pocket, and you put it in an envelope and send it to the P.O. box down below. And that way you'll send your love to Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ will bless your heart. But you got to support the people here out in the community, and by supporting the people in the community, you do that by sacrificing $1 to Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ is going to help you. So send that money out to Jesus Christ. Also, support the church, and we'll continue to support you. God bless you, Ethel. God bless you. God bless you. Right? I can feel it, that people think I'm being hyperbolic, that people think I'm trying to over-exaggerate my case by connecting these religious fanatics to like death cult Vishnulu worshippers of a volcano god. They're exactly the same. 1 + 1 = 2, exactly the same. That they worship a death god. They're willing to sacrifice everything to that death god. And that makes perfect reasonable sense to sacrifice everything to a death god. It makes total sense to sacrifice everything to a death god because I got a book here that says I should sacrifice everything to a death god, right? It's like when a fundamentalist Christian is like, of course we know that Jesus Christ came and died for our sins. It says so right in the Bible. It says so right in the Bible that you shall follow no other gods before me, and I am the way, the truth, and the life, and you shall believe nothing but me. And if you follow anybody else but Jesus Christ, then you're condemned into hell. And it says so right here in this magic book that a man wrote. Like, they're dimwits. Right? Like, and that's at best. So, like, a person that's going to stand up and say, it makes complete and total sense that there should be homeless people starving on the street while 5 men make more money than ancient pharaohs because money. They have money, and money is good. Like, it's a religious ideology. And every single time these guys open up their mouths and start talking, it's a confession, right? They can only perceive the world in religious fanaticism. So when they see scientific evidence and studies done by scientists, they can only interpret it through the lens of religious fanaticism. And so, of course, they're going to believe that what this is a form of religious fanaticism because they're religious fanatics. They're incapable of seeing the world through the lens of a material reality. Right? Like, that's the hard truth about religious fanatics. And so when you confront religious fanatics with evidence and facts, they can only say that's a religious fanaticism. Do more of the preacher talk. I feel like I could do, like, I've said this before on this show, that if I wanted to turn this into like a cult, like a Jesus cult, I think I would be very successful. I think that I would make a lot more money, and I would get a lot more viewership, I think, if I just stood here every day and I was just like, I'm getting something from Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is coming in and he's saying to me, there's a man out there, he's full of doubt. He's full of doubt. I can feel him out in my heart and out in the journey today. I can feel him. His name is Oscar. Oscar, I feel that there is a great shame and a great guilt in your heart today, and I'm here to tell you, Oscar, that Jesus Christ wants to forgive you, Oscar. He wants to forgive you. And he's telling me right now, I'm hearing it right now, Oscar, all you got to do if you want to feel the release and the relief and the forgiveness of the one true Lamb of Jesus Christ is you need to reach into your pocket and you need to send $1 into the email below. And if you send that to us today, Oscar, Jesus will make sure that he meets you at the pearly gates, wearing the crown of heaven and carrying the blood of the Lamb to forgive you so that you can enter the gates of heaven at the end of your journey and wear a crown with Jesus Christ. Bless you, Oscar. Bless you. Like I for real believe that I would make a lot of money. There's a reason why I do that bit and then comment on that bit and then say that I could do that bit in order to make a lot of money, to completely disincentivize me from doing it. To just completely get into that position where it's like, no, I need to be on tape repeatedly over and over again in front of lots of people in a way that could be clipped so easily so that people will know that should I, for whatever reason, end up doing this, people will be like, well, this guy's a fraud. And it'd be easy to prove. It'd be easy to prove. But like, the problem, of course, with that, it touches base with what I was just talking about, is that the people who get influenced by that kind of chicanery and that kind of con artistry don't care. I think this is something that's not very well understood about what's going on in this moment. And you can see it with flat earthers. You can see it with a lot of this UFO conversation. You can see it with a lot of conspiracy theories. You can see it with a lot of this stuff, is that the people who are really spreading this stuff around and the people who are talking about this kind of stuff don't care if it's real or not. They care how it makes them feel. They care about the feelings. They care about the emotions. They care about the emotional aspect of it. And the people who are in the most denial about the fact that they are primarily hysterically emotional are the people who are saying things like facts don't care about your feelings. Like, no one is more emotional than a person who pretends like they're listening to facts while being almost exclusively motivated by emotion. Like, no one is more side-blinded by their emotional self. No one is more in the sway of emotions than the person who believes that they are not. Like, that, those are the people who have been swept away the most. And you could very easily, right? Like, and so manipulating emotions, manipulating people's emotions, especially a culture that is as emotionally schizophrenic and disconnected as ours, is actually easy to do. It's easy to do, right? That's how people become successful and popular, is by manipulating people's emotions and by filling them with a drive. And that's why we constantly are in the sway of these total con men. And like, that's why like Donald Trump is popular. That's why Shapiro is popular. It's why Peterson is popular, because they know how to manipulate people's emotions. Peterson confesses as much to it. Zian writes, a future with communist actors will be objectively more fun than the past with capitalist actors turned politician. We're going to see what's going to happen. I'm actually very excited for this AI technology that is going to let people make video. Like, if that's a tool that I can get my hands on, I'm very tempted by that. I'm very tempted to make something with that. Because, like, I genuinely don't think that these dim-witted capitalists quite understand what that's going to mean. Like, so much of the power of what exists in the media market today is that the voice of the artist has been gatekept by the capitalists. Like, back in the 80s, like, every single comedian that had a career in the 80s and who you still think is popular today, like Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy, Chevy Chase, Steve Martin, Martin Short, like all that group of guys, every single one of those guys was in a movie that was scathingly against capitalism. That was a scathing indictment to the system of capital. And those movies came out in the late 70s and throughout the 80s, because there was less capitalist gatekeeping going on. There was more of a sense of artistry. There was more of a respect for figures like Charlie Chaplin. There was more of a respect for this idea that, like, we should have movies that are about the everyday man, and we should have movies that indict the system of capital and that criticize the system of capital. Well, throughout the late 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s, and certainly right now in this moment where we are now, none of that exists. That you can't make a movie that's scathing indictment of capitalism in the heart of capitalist imperialism. They sneak through every so often. You had like Parasite that snuck through, right? But these are coming out of like the fringes of the empire, South Korea. They're not coming out of Hollywood. They're not coming out of the empire, right? And if you stood up and actually said, I want to make a movie that's a scathing indictment of the system of capital, no capitalist is going to fund that. So they've successfully gate-kept it. But what are they doing right now? They're making a technology where the promise is anybody is going to be able to sit down and make anything that can come out of your head. Anything that can come out of your head, you can make it on the screen. And everybody's hyper-focused on, oh, the lost jobs and all actors and all this. Oh, it's going to create a content. Oh, my goodness, it's going to create all the, like, yeah, it'll do all of that. But you know what it's really going to do? If it actually delivers on the promise, it's going to let somebody sit down and actually tell a story, have it scripted, acted, music, all of it, and presented, and they're going to be able to take it from their brain to your eyes in a cogent and successful manner, all by themselves. Like, and I think the capitalists are just too stupid to realize it. I just don't think they understand that what's going to happen is an ocean of anti-capitalist art. That's exactly what's going to happen. It's just this overwhelming ocean, tidal wave, a sea of anti-capitalist art. Because right now, for artists to actually produce anti-capitalist art, like someone like me, I don't have the skill to draw. I've been successfully alienated from artistic communities. I'm exhausted all of the time. But for someone like me to be able to just sit down and prompt an AI and have them generate it, and then send that out into the world. Like, I think it's very dangerous what they're doing, but they're too stupid to realize it. Did you watch Idiocracy? I make the argument that the president, Nacho or whatever his name was actually smarter than any American president in the last 50 years. That president saw that there was a problem. Yeah, Macho Camacho, right? He saw that there was a domestic issue, right? The domestic issue was that their crops weren't growing. He sought a solution to that problem, right? Which was find a smart guy to figure out the problem. And that smart guy figured out the problem and solved the problem, right? That makes Macho Camacho smarter and a better president than Trump, Obama, Biden, Bush, Clinton, Reagan, and Bush, for sure. Because he saw that there was a problem, acknowledged the problem, and then solved the problem. So the president of the film Idiocracy, which was supposed to represent the stupidest humanity could get, was smarter than all of the presidents within my living memory. No, I don't think that movie is actually anti-capitalist. Like I think that film is it's actually got like a really like Methuselah, kind of a fascist eugenics tone to it, right? Like, sure, it kind of takes the piss out of a little bit of the more consumerist aspects of the society. I think that that's true, but like the whole premise of the society of the movie is that stupid people will have more children, right? And so humanity will just become stupider because stupid people have more children, which I think is like a very eugenicist perspective, right? And like I think that you could kind of forgive Mike Judge for that perspective because I think he was just kind of riffing on an idea. I don't think he was sitting there writing a thesis. I don't think he was trying to like actually be a eugenicist. But like the film wasn't saying we get stupider because of capitalism. Like that if that had have been the claim of the film, then it would actually be an anti-capitalist film. But that wasn't the claim of the film, right? That wasn't really the claim of the film. But the claim of the film was just that stupid people have more children than intelligent people, which is a eugenicist position. And yeah, no, I agree with that. Like, it's anti-consumer. Like, I think Mike Judge has always had kind of an anti-consumerist perspective. Like, if you look at like Beavis and Butthead, right? Beavis and Butthead was a very was obviously a spoof on modern American life and modern American suburban life, right? He fit in very neatly in the '90s with the musical critiques, like Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, Soundgarden. Even Pearl Jam, like these bands that came out during that period of time in the MTV generation, were all a heavy critique against the consumerist suburban lifestyle that had been erected under Reagan, right? And I think that Beavis and Butthead was also that Mike Judge was definitely a part of that wave, and then he ends up moving and pivoting, taking a character from Beavis and Butthead and making a far more interesting series, King of the Hill, which is kind of not a glorification is way too far, but like definitely a love letter to like the rural Texan man. Like that's really what King of the Hill is that it's slice of life comedy that really doesn't lampoon the South. It's a love letter to Southerners. And I think that in America, it's so rare to actually see that kind of thing done. That usually when Southerners are portrayed in modern media, it is to take the piss out of them or to tokenize them in many ways. That they're, oh, well, this is just a token, oh, he's from Texas. And it's always Texas, right? Because it's the big one and that's where most people are, so we'll market it to them. It's a very cynical decision most of the time. King of the Hill was really like, what if we had a story that was told in Texas about Southerners and about the people that they were surrounded by and the situation they're surrounded by? And it was just like a slice of life of their reality, and not to condemn or ridicule them in the way that I think Beavis and Butthead definitely ridiculed the protagonists of its story. Like, you're not supposed to like Beavis and Butthead, right? You understand that they're stupid, and you're supposed to make fun of them. You're in on that joke, but that's not true with King of the Hill. You in many ways you come to love Hank and Peggy and that group of people, right? That they're and you see that they're worthy of your admiration and your respect, and that it's so they've got that kind of slice of life sort of thing. And so I think Mike Judd I think was, but I've never seen him as an anti-capitalist, right? Because I think that his perspective of things is not rooted in that. Like, Hank Hill is quite like, I sell propane and propane accessories, right? Like, so in many ways, I think that Mike Judge doesn't really have much by way of commentary against the system of capital, because I think his perspective is always very on the ground, right? And that he's willing to point out some of the absurdities of modern life, but I don't think he actually has a systemic critique. You know, which, and that's fine. Like, not everybody is going to have a systemic critique about the society that they live in, and not everything is supposed to be a systemic critique. Like, humanity comes first. And I guess I'm on this big, long diatribe about Mike Judge now, but like, that that I think is where his focus has always been, is humans first, and he's never really tried to levy anything against the system of capital. Yeah. Well, King of the Hill is is like King of the Hill is popular. I was about to say good, but yeah, it's all subjective. But it's popular for the same reason that Full House was popular, and the reason why Fuller House is popular is that it kind of ends up being pornography. Like it's like, I don't want to say it this way, but it is like, it's like fantasy. It's a fantasy porn for wholesome people, right? Like every conflict that arises in an episode of Full House is too many men like me. I have too many job offers. Oh no, I can't go see this because I have this other exciting thing, right? Like the problem is not a real problem, right? Like, I live in a beautiful house surrounded by a family that loves me, doing an impressive job with people that are respected. And if there is a conflict, it's resolved with hugs and statements of love, and an audience going bah, right? That guy, good to see you. Omnicidal tendencies, good to see you too. And so it ends up being a kind of an escapism device for people. And critics have always been confused by Full House, and I've always understood it. It's always made sense. It's like, yeah, if I was like a Midwestern housewife, I would love Full House. Full House would be great. It's loaded with babies. It's loaded with all of the stuff that like a Midwestern housewife would absolutely love. And if I was just like a Texas welder, right? If I was just like a Texas welder living in Texas, surrounded by other Texans, Bex, absolutely, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for your contribution. Solidarity to you, my friend. I appreciate it. I appreciate it a lot, my man. Uncle Jesse, yeah, Uncle Jesse, homicidal, absolutely. Like, Uncle Jesse is like a hunk of burning love, right? And like, while the newer Fuller House pivoted away from like, hunky men, but not really. Like, there's hunky men all over that show, right? Like, DJ is surrounded by hunky men. Like, Stephanie's surrounded by hunky men, right? So it's like, yeah, there is that like voyeuristic aspect of it, and I think that King of the Hill has that. King of the Hill has that voyeuristic aspect of like, I'm just a man that likes to go do my job welding, and I come home and I get my lawnmower and mow my lawn. I sell welding tools and welding tool accessories. And I come home and I sit down, have a nice beer, and I turn on the TV, and there's good old Hanky and the gang, right? I really see myself. I really see myself in Hank Hill. He's a good man. He fights for what's right, and he fights for the family, and he's always going to do what's correct. That's why I like him. He sells propane and propane accessories, and I appreciate that about Hank Hill. So like, yeah, I think that it's and it's not an audience that gets a lot of stuff. It's not an audience that gets a lot of play. You know what I mean? Like, and so I think just talk like that always. Well, gentlemen, here we are today. Today we're here to critique the system of capital. I'm here to tell you today I got some good articles here today. Wouldn't that be wonderful if this is actually how I talked the whole time? I was just like, hello, my name is John Sanderson. I'm here to tell you today that system of capital needs to be overthrown, and that we stand against the system of global capital. Sweden has joined NATO, and now the EU and NATO want the Ascension Trio, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine to join them. And Armenia has suspended all activities with CSTO, Russia's version of NATO. Yeah, it's very stupid. Like it's very very dumb situation. If I was Sweden, man, like I like the idea that these countries, Finland, Sweden, Norway, the idea that these guys are joining NATO is so dumb. Like stay out of it, guys. There's nothing but heartache at the end of that. Like you want to join a military alliance right now as it's losing. Just seems like a bad call, man. Just sounds like a bad call. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if NATO can survive. Like it's a this failed war with Russia. It's got to be a major crisis. Like it's got to be a major crisis and an existential crisis for NATO, right? Like and like what's crazy to me is that they caused it. Like they're the reason this war happened. It was so stupid. It was just so dumb. Anyway, I'm over. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for your donations. Thank you, Bex, again. Thank you. Somebody donated previously. Generation, I think it was you. Yeah. Thank you so much for your donations, guys. I really appreciate it. Please like and share and subscribe, and you can donate to the Patreon, all of that stuff. But tell people I exist, right? And most of all, always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.